Hi there, I'm Lacey. And yes, my mother slapped me right at my own wedding. Why? Because I refused to hand over my $50,000 wedding fund to my brother. But that wasn't the beginning, and it sure wasn't the worst of it. They faked emails, spread rumors, even tried to destroy my job, my relationship, everything. I kept asking myself, how far will your own family go to break you, just to protect the one who keeps failing? And when the truth finally hit me, it wasn't just betrayal, it was a lifetime of being the backup plan. The breeze carried the scent of lavender and freshly turned soil as I stepped onto the cobbled patio of the vineyard. Strings of warm lights hung above us like stars pinned in place, casting a golden hue over the rustic tables and rows of guests holding glasses of wine. Everything about that afternoon had felt surreal. The flowers, the laughter, the way Dorian looked at me like I was the only woman in the world. I'd always imagined my engagement party would be intimate, sweet, maybe even a little chaotic with all the family personalities in one place. But I never imagined it would be the moment everything started unraveling. Dorian was across the patio, talking to my cousin Drew near the bar. He looked effortlessly put together, sleeves rolled up, glass in hand, smiling at something Drew had just said. I smiled too, watching him. He made me feel safe, real. Like this life we were building together had solid ground beneath it. My mother, Wanda, was making the rounds. She wore her usual pastel suit, the kind that screamed Southern matriarch with something to prove, and carried a smile that had fooled strangers for decades. My father, Marvin, stood nearby as her silent shadow, present, but never interfering. I had barely finished my sparkling water when I heard the clinking of a spoon against glass. Wanda stood near the center of the gathering, a wineglass raised delicately in her left hand. "Can I have everyone's attention for a moment?" she asked sweetly, but her tone carried the weight of something more. The crowd quieted. Dorian stepped back toward me. I straightened my spine. "I just want to say how proud Marvin and I are of our daughter," she began, gesturing toward me. "Lacey, you've grown into a thoughtful, accomplished woman. Dorian, we're thrilled to welcome you into the family." A warm round of applause followed. A few people tapped their glasses for a kiss, which Dorian and I obliged with a small chuckle. But then Wanda raised her hand again. "And, while we're on the topic of weddings," she continued, her voice taking on a slightly different texture, "there's something important we've been thinking about as a family." My heart sank, just a hair. I didn't know what was coming, but the way she looked at me made my palms cold. "As you all know," she said, "Lacey has had a $50,000 fund set aside for her wedding since she was 17, a gift from Marvin and me." People nodded. I caught a few raised eyebrows. "But Kendrick's getting married next year too," she added, shifting the direction of the spotlight with expert ease. "And unlike Lacey, he's had some real setbacks. School debt, business troubles. Life hasn't exactly been kind." She paused, then smiled, a smile too polished to be sincere. "So, Marvin and I have decided to redistribute the wedding fund. To make things fair, Kendrick will receive half." The clapping stopped. You could hear the wine settling in the glasses. I didn't move at first. I didn't even blink. I looked at her. Then at Kendrick, who stood a few feet away, trying to look modest but failing miserably behind that smug little smirk he always wore when he got his way. I took a slow breath, then spoke clearly enough for everyone to hear. "No." Some people chuckled nervously, thinking maybe I was playing along. But I wasn't. "My wedding fund is mine. You gave it to me when I was 17. I've planned responsibly. I've never asked for more. I'm not sharing it." Wanda's smile tightened. Marvin, of course, said nothing. Kendrick made a dramatic shrug, like, "What's the big deal?" Wanda stepped forward, wineglass still in hand. "We thought you'd be more understanding," she said, her voice dropping low enough for only those nearest to hear. "You always had more than him. You should know when it's time to give back." "Sharing isn't the same as being robbed," I said, keeping my voice level. "Especially when it's disguised as generosity." Her jaw clenched slightly. Then she smiled again, this time as if warning me with her teeth. After a few murmurs and awkward coughs, the crowd slowly returned to conversation. But the energy had shifted. The celebration had thinned. Later, after the toast, I found myself near the pergola at the edge of the venue. The vines curled around the beams, their new green shoots reaching toward the sky like they hadn't just been scorched by my mother's brand of affection. Wanda found me again, this time alone. "You should think about postponing the wedding," she said softly but not kindly, "until we sort all this out as a family." "Postpone it?" I blinked. "Because Kendrick's broke?" "Because it would show maturity. Grace, character." "I've already shown character. I budgeted, I saved. I didn't blow mine on bad investments and rented Instagram models." Her nostrils flared, but she didn't lose composure. "You're acting like this day is only about you." I let out a short laugh. "That's because it is, Mom. It's my engagement party. Or at least it was." Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Kendrick watching us. He raised a glass as if to say cheers, then turned back to schmooze a few cousins. I didn't have to say another word. I walked past my mother and back into the crowd, though I felt like I was walking into a battlefield instead of a celebration. The rest of the night passed in a haze. I smiled where I needed to, nodded through conversations, posed for photos I never wanted to look at again. By the time we got home, I was drained. I sat on the edge of our bed, pulled out my wedding planning journal, and opened it to a fresh page. Nothing came. Not a single idea. Not a venue note or budget tweak or timeline revision. I stared at the page, then shut the book. This wasn't how it was supposed to feel. "This is my wedding," I whispered to the dark room, "but it already feels like a hostage negotiation." Morning light slipped through the curtains, landing in stripes across the end of our bed. I hadn't slept well. The weight of the previous evening pressed down on me like a second blanket. Thick, suffocating. The silence in the room wasn't peaceful. It was loaded. I lay there for a few more minutes, eyes open, staring at the ceiling fan as it rotated slowly overhead. Dorian stirred beside me, already halfway to sitting up. "You okay?" he asked gently, voice still gravelly with sleep. "I'm fine," I lied. "Just tired." He didn't push. He rarely did when he sensed I needed space. That's one of the things I appreciated most about him. He wasn't a fixer. He was a listener. And sometimes that's more powerful. I shuffled out of bed and padded to the kitchen. The scent of coffee was already brewing, rich and grounding. He had started it for me, a small act of love, but this morning it felt monumental. As I poured my cup, my phone buzzed on the counter. Then again, and again. The first was from my Aunt Monica. "He's your brother, Lacey. You know what he's been through. Maybe it's time to think bigger than just yourself." Then a message from a cousin I barely spoke to. "Wow, cold move at your party. Family comes first, remember?" And another, this one from someone I didn't even recognize right away. "He would have done it for you. Don't let money break the family." I set the phone down and pushed my cup away, appetite gone. I hadn't even posted anything, not a word. But the group chats and family texts were buzzing like a hive, and I was the wasp they'd decided to swat. Dorian stepped into the kitchen, handed me a slice of toast I hadn't asked for. "Wanda's working the phones, huh?" he asked. I nodded slowly. "She doesn't waste time." He leaned against the counter. "Let me guess. Kendrick's the underdog, you're the villain." "I guess that makes you the enabler," I said, trying to smile, but my lips barely cooperated. 2 days passed with little relief. I tried to distract myself, work, planning, laundry, even alphabetizing the spice rack. Nothing worked. The silence between me and my family had only deepened, except for the noise they were generating behind my back. On the third morning, I had an appointment at a boutique downtown to try on a dress I'd secretly loved more than the one I'd already chosen. It was quieter than the others, tucked in an old brick building with soft lighting and polished wood floors. A place that made you feel like you were about to say yes to more than just a gown. I slipped into the ivory dress, lace wrapping around my shoulders like a whisper. As I turned in front of the mirror, admiring the silhouette, the assistant knocked gently on the dressing room door. "Miss Gellner?" she said. "There's a woman here asking for you. She says she's your mother, said it's urgent." My breath caught for half a second. "Send her back," I said, voice steady. "But I'm not changing." Wanda walked in less than a minute later, composed but clearly performing. "Oh, honey," she breathed, looking me up and down. "You look beautiful. That dress suits you. I didn't respond. She paused, then stepped closer. I came to talk, that's all. I just think we need to clear the air. There's nothing unclear, I said. You tried to take my money in front of 50 people. She winced. You always make things sound worse than they are. Before I could respond, her face changed. Her hand moved to her chest. She wobbled slightly. Mom? She staggered back, clutching her chest dramatically, eyes fluttering. I can't breathe. One of the assistants rushed in, calling for help. Another grabbed a chair. Wanda let herself fall into it, gasping. Call 911, she whispered. Please. I didn't move. I just watched, cold rising in my stomach. Paramedics arrived within minutes. They checked her vitals, ran through questions. One of them turned to me. She's stable, heart rate's fine, no signs of arrhythmia. She might be under stress. She always is, I muttered. They left soon after. Wanda insisted she didn't need to go to the hospital, just needed to sit a while. When the staff cleared out, I leaned in and whispered low. You staged that. Her eyes flicked up, lips barely parting. I don't know what you're talking about. Don't insult my intelligence. She stood slowly. You used to care when I was hurting. I used to believe it was real. She smoothed her jacket and walked out of the boutique without another word. I stayed behind, numb. The assistant offered me a glass of water, which I accepted, still dressed in that once perfect gown. That evening I received a call from the boutique manager. Hi, Lacey, she said carefully. Just wanted to confirm. Did you want to cancel your fittings and transfer your deposit? I blinked. What? No, I never said that. Oh, well, someone claiming to be your mother made the request right after the ambulance left. We thought it was strange but didn't want to overstep. She paused. She also suggested your stress level made you unfit to finalize anything right now. I felt the sting like a slap across the face. She had no right, I said. Please reinstate everything, and if she contacts you again, call me first, always. Of course, she said gently. You're our bride. Only you. After hanging up, I dropped my phone on the couch and sat still for a long time. I didn't cry. Not yet. That night, I pulled an old photo out from the back of my desk drawer. Me and Kendrick, maybe 16 and 14. His arm looped around my shoulder, both of us smiling into the camera. But even then, my smile had never quite reached my eyes. I set the photo down gently on the edge of my desk, letting my fingers linger just a second longer than necessary. There was a time, brief, blurry, when I believed Kendrick and I could have been close. But looking at that photo now, all I could think about was how long I'd been told to pretend. It was just past 10 p.m., and Dorian had already gone to bed. I stayed in the office, surrounded by old boxes we hadn't yet unpacked since moving into our townhouse. Somewhere in one of them, I remembered, were the original bank documents, the ones that showed when the wedding fund had been created. I dug them out. The pages were yellowing at the edges, but the ink was clear. 2 custodial accounts. One for Kendrick. One for me. Set up when I was 17 and he was 15. Same starting balance, same terms. But only one of us had something left. I sat on the floor, the weight of that realization heavier now than it had been then. I remembered the way my parents used to say, "It's yours to use wisely when the time comes." I took that to heart. I chose a state university, worked part-time, earned scholarships. I spent modestly. I planned. Kendrick didn't. He opted for a small private school in Phoenix, dropped out in under 2 years, spent the rest on a custom sneaker business, bought gear, booked photographers, threw a launch party at a rooftop bar in Scottsdale. It flopped in 6 months. When I asked once what happened to his fund, my dad looked up from his paper and muttered, "It's not something we talk about, honey. He's figuring it out. Figuring it out." That was always the excuse. The phrase that was supposed to explain away recklessness and entitlement. I had heard it since we were kids. The next morning, I got a notification on my phone, a tag on someone's Instagram story. I didn't recognize the username right away, but I tapped anyway. It was Kendrick. On a boat. Lake Havasu. Clear blue water in the background, red Solo cups stacked on a floating cooler, and Kendrick laughing, shirtless, his arm around some guy I'd never seen. In the next frame, he toasted with a group of friends. Shout out to Kendrick for renting this beast! One guy yelled into the camera. My stomach twisted. It wasn't even jealousy. It was nausea. How easily he could play broke one day and flex the next. In another story, he wore Gucci slides, the kind that cost more than my wedding veil, and oversized black shades I recognized from a luxury pop-up I'd seen months ago. At the same time, I scrolled up to read his most recent text to me. We're still waiting on your response about the wedding fund. Be decent. Be decent. I stared at the words for a full minute before locking my screen and setting the phone down face first. My hands were trembling. But it wasn't rage, not exactly. It was clarity, like stepping into a room I hadn't realized was filled with smoke. By noon, I had already pulled up every screenshot, receipt, and message I had. I opened a new folder titled Fund War and started documenting everything. That afternoon, I got a message from someone I hadn't spoken to in years, Ryan. We'd met briefly in college, but he was really Kendrick's friend. I hesitated before opening it. Hey, Lacey, I know this is random, but I saw your brother's IG. Just thought you should know. He still owes me $1,200. I blinked, reading it again. Said he needed help buying inventory for some sneaker thing. Promised to pay me back double. That was almost 2 years ago. I replied simply, "Thank you for telling me." A moment later, he sent a voice note. I debated ignoring it, but curiosity won. His voice was calm but bitter. Your brother's been playing everyone for years, including your parents. Look, I get it. You want to believe people grow, but he's not broke. He's addicted to looking like a winner. The truth rang so loud I almost dropped the phone. That night, I sat at the kitchen counter, laptop open, phone beside me, documents spread out. I didn't touch my wine. I barely touched dinner. I watched Kendrick's story loop again, his laugh echoing through the speaker. I watched it not with fury, but with a strange sense of relief. Because now I knew. This wasn't just a difference in choices. It wasn't about hard luck or bad timing. It was about who Kendrick chose to be, and who my parents chose to protect. This isn't some one-time misunderstanding, I whispered to myself. This is who he is, and they all knew it. The hum of the refrigerator was the only sound in the kitchen as I stared at my laptop screen. I hadn't moved in almost 20 minutes. My dinner sat untouched beside me, grilled salmon and steamed vegetables Dorian had brought home, trying to cheer me up. But I couldn't bring myself to lift the fork. A notification buzzed on my phone, followed by another. My stomach tensed as I reached for it. The first was a voicemail from my cousin Melissa. Hey, Lacey, I'm so sorry. I heard about you and Dorian. I had no idea he cheated. If you want to talk, I'm here. My breath caught halfway through the message. Cheated? The second notification was a text from another friend. He seemed so loyal. I hope you're okay. If you need anything, just say the word. I sat up straighter, heat rising to my cheeks. I immediately called Melissa. She picked up on the second ring. Hey, she said cautiously. What did you hear exactly? I asked. She paused. Your mom called me yesterday. She said the wedding was off, that Dorian had been unfaithful, and you were trying to handle it privately. That's a lie, I said flatly. A complete lie. Melissa hesitated. She sounded pretty upset. I just thought, well, I didn't know what to think. I thanked her and hung up. My pulse was racing. I opened my email, and there it was. Several unread messages from acquaintances and coworkers. Subject lines like, checking in on you. Hearts with you. Sorry to hear. I opened one from my old roommate Lauren. I just got your wedding cancellation. Didn't see that coming, but I'm proud of you for prioritizing your healing. I hadn't sent anything. Then I saw it. The sender's email looked like mine, but it wasn't. One extra letter. A domain swap. It was a fake account, created to look real. The message read, Dear friends and family, due to recent events and the need for personal healing, Dorian and I have decided to postpone the wedding. Thank you for your understanding. It was signed with my full name. My throat tightened. This wasn't just petty sabotage anymore. They weren't just trying to get the money. They were trying to erase my narrative, rewrite my life. I texted Dorian, We need to talk when you're home. Urgent. Sleep didn't come that night. Every time I closed my eyes, all I could see was Wanda's carefully constructed smile, Kendrick's smug expression behind designer sunglasses, and now this, an invisible knife aimed directly at my credibility. By morning, I had barely eaten half a banana before heading to the office. My boss, Sarah, intercepted me near the elevator. "Can we talk for a second?" she asked, gently but firmly. We stepped into her office. She closed the door. "We received something concerning," she began, sliding a printout across the desk. It was a screenshot of an anonymous email with a link to a video, grainy footage of someone who looked like me in a compromising scene with a man I'd never seen before. The background was dim, the face unclear, but the voice, my voice, had been crudely mimicked. "We know it's not you," Sarah said quickly, trying to reassure me, "but it was sent to 5 people, including HR." My hands turned ice cold. The subject line was, "Know who you're working with," she added. "We're handling it discreetly, but I thought you should know." I nodded, though my throat was too tight to speak. An hour later, I left early. I told HR I wasn't feeling well, which wasn't a lie. As I sat in the driver's seat of my car, parked behind the office, I stared at my reflection in the rearview mirror. "They're not coming after the wedding anymore," I whispered aloud. "They're coming after me." I got home before Dorian. I changed into a hoodie and curled up on the back porch, the Arizona air unusually cool for late spring. When he walked through the sliding door, I didn't say anything. I just handed him my phone. He scrolled through the emails, then watched the video, his jaw tightening, his breathing shallow. "This is," he started, then stopped. "This is criminal." "Do you believe me?" I asked, quieter than I meant to. "I never stopped," he replied. He set the phone down, pulled me into his chest, and held me there until the shaking in my hands stopped. For a while, we didn't speak. "They want to ruin me before I even get to the altar," I said finally. But the moment the words left my lips, something inside me shifted. I was done playing nice. I was done hoping someone else would fix it. If they wanted a war, they were about to learn what I looked like in armor. The next morning began quiet, too quiet. Dorian had already left for work, and the house felt unusually still. I stood in the kitchen, hands wrapped around a cup of coffee that had gone cold 15 minutes ago. I didn't move. I just stared out the window, watching a hummingbird hover near the patio feeder, fluttering, restless, trying to hold still, the same way I felt inside. I picked up my phone and opened my contact list. My thumb hovered over Kendrick's name. I hadn't spoken to him directly in months, not since before the engagement party. Every fight, every manipulation had filtered through my parents. But that day, something shifted. I wasn't going to wait for someone else to protect me anymore. I was done being polite. I pressed call. It rang 4 times, then voicemail. I didn't hang up. I took a breath and said, "If you want to be a man, Kendrick, pick up your phone." Then I ended the call and waited. An hour later, my phone lit up. He was calling. I picked up and said nothing. "What's up, big sis?" he said, all faux charm. "Missed me?" I kept my voice even. "I know about the fake email, the video, the deepfake, the messages you or someone close to you sent to my coworkers. I know everything." He laughed, short, sharp. "You think I have time to create fake videos? You're giving me a little too much credit." "Don't lie, Kendrick. I've already talked to people. You were sloppy." "What people?" "Alicia, ring a bell?" I asked. She said you did the same thing to her. Fake messages, threats, tried to ruin her reputation when she dumped you. He went silent. A long pause followed. I didn't wait for him to speak. "I've got the video files, IP logs, screenshots. I forwarded everything to my lawyer. If you thought you could play me like one of your frat buddies, you chose the wrong target." Still, he said nothing. I lowered my voice. "Next time you try to ruin someone, Kendrick, pick a target who's dumber than you." Then I hung up. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel angry. I felt like I'd finally stood up in a room full of people who'd spent years telling me to sit down. I turned to my laptop and opened a new email. This time it was for Wanda and Marvin. No CC, no emotional preamble. Just facts. Subject, final notice. If either of you contacts anyone in my life again, co-workers, friends, extended family, I will pursue legal action. I have the recordings, the digital trail, the witnesses. You get one chance to stop. Use it wisely. I hit send. No hesitation, no tremble in my fingers. The reply never came, but the silence, it was deafening and revealing. I forwarded the email to Kaylin, my attorney. Within minutes, she replied, "That was strong. You're protecting your life, not just your money." She was right. I wasn't just safeguarding a wedding or a bank account. I was reclaiming my dignity, my narrative, my peace. Later that week, Dorian and I met with our wedding planner, Jocelyn. Her studio smelled like eucalyptus and paper. The whiteboards were filled with seating charts and flower combinations, but we didn't waste time on aesthetics. "Cut Kendrick, Wanda, and Marvin from the guest list," I told her. She blinked. "All of them?" "No backdoor access, not even the parking lot, I'm serious." She nodded, scribbling notes. "We'll inform security. Want me to circulate photos to the team?" "Yes," I said. "Circulate everything." Dorian added calmly, "If they show up, escort them out immediately. No second chances." Jocelyn hesitated again. "Are you absolutely sure?" I met her eyes. "If they come near me again, they'll regret it." We finalized everything. The new entrance list, security arrangements, code words for staff. As we wrapped up, I glanced down at my wedding binder. The glossy cover reflected my face, stern, clear-eyed, and so far from the daughter my parents once molded. "They've mistaken my silence for submission," I said quietly. Dorian placed his hand over mine. "Not anymore." I looked at the schedule, the RSVP list, the caterer details. No fear, no guilt, no doubt. They'll see who I really am. The following Monday started like any other. I was in the middle of reviewing a vendor invoice when my phone buzzed on the desk. It was Dorian, not a text, a call. I answered immediately. "Everything okay?" He didn't respond right away. Then, "You need to come to my office. Now." His tone wasn't sharp. It wasn't panicked. It was cold, like something had been drained from him. I stood up, grabbed my keys, and was in the car within minutes. His office wasn't far, just 15 minutes across town. But every red light felt like an hour. When I arrived, he met me at the front lobby. He looked calm on the surface, but I saw it in his eyes. Something had cracked. He handed me a manila envelope, already opened. "It came addressed to you. Here." Inside were 5 printed stills, screenshots from the fake video Kendrick had circulated. Grainy, low res, but enough to trigger suspicion in anyone not looking closely. And on top of them, a handwritten note. "Are you sure she's the one?" I stared at the paper like it might catch fire in my hands. "Who opened it?" I asked. My manager saw it first. It was dropped off by courier before I got in. Humiliation didn't even register. Not anymore. It had evolved. What I felt now wasn't shame. It was rage, pure, blistering rage. "They're not just trying to humiliate me," I said slowly. "This is warfare, psychological warfare." Dorian nodded. "I told my manager the whole story. They believe us. But this is insane." "No," I corrected. "This is criminal." I left Dorian's office without saying much more. I needed space to think, to plan. By the time I got home, I was already dialing Kaylin Voss. She answered after 2 rings. "I've got something new," I said, pacing the living room floor. It was sent directly to Dorian's office, with a note. "Good," she replied. "That's enough. We'll escalate." We filed the paperwork that same day. A formal cease and desist to Kendrick Gellner, included in it civil harassment language, digital stalking reference, and potential defamation charges, all legal tools locked and loaded. "He'll laugh at first," Kaylin said, scanning the draft. "But he won't laugh when a court summons shows up in his inbox." "I don't care if he laughs," I said. "I care that it ends." We started organizing a timeline. Every email, every fake message, every printed threat. I built a digital file, labeled each entry, attached screenshots, audio, metadata logs. "If this goes public," I told Kaylin, "we do it on our terms. Full story, full context." "Truth with receipts is bulletproof," she said. It was the first thing anyone had said to me in days that made me smile. That night I sat alone on the patio, phone in hand. My thumb hovered over a number I hadn't called in weeks, my father's. After a moment of hesitation, I tapped call. He answered on the second ring. "Hi, sweetheart." His voice was softer than I remembered, hesitant. I need to ask you something, I said. Why are you letting this happen? A pause. I didn't think it would go this far, he said eventually. It already has. It's beyond far. They tried to get me fired. They sent garbage to Dorian's job. He sighed. Your mother's just trying to protect Kendrick. No, she's not. She's trying to silence me to protect herself from admitting what she's enabled. I held my breath. You raised me better than this. And yet, here we are. He said nothing. I still love you, I said softly. But I love myself more now. And I ended the call. I didn't cry. I didn't second guess it. I just sat there for a while, watching the last rays of sunset slip behind the trees. Later that evening, as I was brushing my hair in the hallway mirror, a message popped up on my phone. It was from Jolene, my cousin who had always floated on the edge of family drama, never fully in, but never fully out. Her text read, Your mom was spotted at the venue this afternoon. She was asking for the wedding schedule. Staff said she asked about delivery times. I think something's coming. I lowered the phone slowly. I looked into the mirror and didn't flinch. Then let them come, I whispered to my reflection. The sun rose slowly over Flagstaff, casting warm amber light across the botanical garden. I'd barely slept, but when I opened my eyes, there was no hesitation. I knew today was the day everything changed, one way or another. By mid-morning, the venue team was in motion. White chairs lined the garden path. A wooden arch wrapped in lavender and ivy stood tall in front of the mountains. Guests trickled in, guided by staff with quiet smiles and discreet clipboards. In the bridal suite, I sat still as my stylist pinned the last curl in place. I watched my reflection, not for beauty, but for steel. There were no nerves, just focus. Outside, Dorian stood under the arch, his navy suit crisp, his eyes sweeping the crowd. Calm, steady. But he kept checking his watch, like he was waiting for something we hadn't written into the schedule. At 1:12 p.m., Jolene's text buzzed across my phone. She's here, with Kendrick. I didn't blink. My head of security, Marcus, intercepted them behind the garden, near the loading path. Kendrick raised his voice, something about blood and entitlement. Wanda tried a softer tone, said she just wanted a word with me. When that didn't work, she snapped. I'll sue this venue, she barked. You can't keep a mother from her daughter's wedding. Marcus remained unfazed. Your invitation was formally revoked. You're not on the list. You'll need to leave. They didn't argue much after that. They turned and walked off. Or so it seemed. The ceremony began just after 1:30. The harpist plucked a soft melody. Guests turned. The aisle cleared. My Uncle Lawrence took my arm. My heart didn't pound. I just breathed in and stepped forward. 10 steps down the path, everything went still. A hand grabbed my shoulder from behind. I turned, already knowing who it was. Wanda stood behind me, eyes burning, voice low but shaking. You're really going to ruin this family over a pile of money? I didn't step back. I didn't raise my voice. You ruined it yourself. Her hand came fast. A sharp crack echoed through the garden. She slapped me, hard. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Someone dropped their phone. The harpist stopped playing. For a second, all I could hear was wind in the leaves. I didn't fall. I didn't cry. I stood there, cheek burning, eyes locked on hers. You did that, I said softly, in front of everyone. Kendrick lunged forward, face twisted in anger. Dorian stepped between us in one smooth motion. Touch her and you're done, he said. I raised my hand. No, I told him. Let the law handle this. From the third row, Eleanor, my godmother and a retired school principal, stood up and calmly dialed her phone. Yes, she told dispatch. There's been a physical assault at an event. The location is Whisper Pines Garden venue. Wanda froze. Minutes later, sirens echoed in the distance. 2 uniformed officers entered the venue gate, quietly but directly. They approached us without hesitation. Ma'am, one of them said to me, were you struck? I nodded. Yes, by her. Wanda sputtered. It was a misunderstanding, a private family moment. The officer shook his head. It's also assault. He turned to her. You'll need to come with us. Handcuffs clicked. Guests whispered. Some recorded. Most just stared in stunned silence. As they led her away, I stood unmoving in the middle of the aisle. Dorian stepped beside me, his palm slipping into mine. You want to stop? He asked gently. I looked around, at the stunned faces, the quiet horror, and I shook my head. No, this is our day, let's finish it. The efficient, eyes wide but calm, nodded. Then we begin again. We did. We said our vows with voices that trembled but never wavered. And when we kissed, the applause wasn't polite. It was thunderous, triumphant. Not because it was a wedding, because it was a victory. As the cheers faded and we turned to face our guests, I glanced toward the back gate. The path was empty now, and for the first time in weeks, I smiled like I meant it. We weren't broken, just rebuilt. The morning after the wedding felt like waking up on the other side of a war. The air outside was crisp and unusually quiet, as if even the wind had decided to give us space to breathe. I wrapped myself in Dorian's flannel robe and stepped out onto the balcony of our small Flagstaff apartment. Steam rose from my mug as I sipped coffee, watching the sun stretch over the pine trees. We hadn't unpacked the gifts. The decorations were still half boxed in the living room, but none of it mattered. I was finally married, and I was finally free. But peace doesn't last long when your past refuses to let go. 3 days after the ceremony, Jolene called while I was grocery shopping. I thought you should know, she said, lowering her voice. Your brother's wedding is being planned at the Ridge. I nearly dropped the lemon in my hand. The Ridge was the most expensive resort in northern Arizona. Private chefs, helicopter photo ops, a spa that charged more per hour than I made in a day when I first started working. I'm guessing he didn't fund it with sneaker sales, I muttered. Jolene hesitated. Word is, your parents took out a personal loan. Big one. I didn't reply. I just stared at the checkout line, the woman ahead of me flipping through coupons while her toddler tugged at a balloon. The contrast made me feel sick. That night, I got a text from my father. Just 4 words. Sorry it went that far. No explanation, no apology, just a limp attempt at cleanup. I didn't reply. Instead, I opened my phone's settings and blocked both his number and my mother's. From now on, they could speak to my lawyer, not me. The next blow came subtly but loud. Aunt Corinne posted on Facebook. There comes a time when protecting someone's failure costs you someone who's always been good. No names, no tags. But everyone knew what it meant. More relatives started declining Kendrick's invitation. Some made excuses. Others were blunt. He's not the man I thought he was. After what they did to Lacey? No thanks. The narrative my parents had tried to control, the loyal family, the good son, the difficult daughter, it collapsed under its own weight. I didn't feel vindicated. I didn't feel smug. I felt done. They didn't lose me, I told Dorian that weekend. They threw me away. We had taken a short trip to Sedona, 2 hours away. Just us. No phones, no email, no wedding drama, just space. We stood together on a red rock overlook at sunset. The wind tugged at my hair. My fingers locked in his. I'm changing my name, I said. To what? He asked gently. Back to my mother's maiden name, from before she stopped being someone I recognized. He nodded. I'll support whatever helps you feel whole. That night, we stayed in a cabin with no Wi-Fi. I journaled. Dorian read a book by the fireplace. For once, the silence didn't feel like tension. It felt like air. The next morning, over breakfast, I brought up the wedding fund. There's about $6,000 left after the down payment, I said. I don't want it sitting there. He raised an eyebrow. What do you want to do with it? There's a nonprofit in Prescott that helps women separate from abusive families. Legal advice, housing, counseling. I want to donate it. He blinked, then smiled. Turning the damage into purpose. I nodded. Exactly. Let it end with good. When we got home, I opened my inbox for the first time in days. One email stood out. Subject: Please talk to me. I miss you. Sender: Marvin Gellner. I stared at it. My heart didn't clench. My hands didn't tremble. I just closed the laptop. Letting go doesn't mean I wish them pain. It just means I don't want to be the one hurting anymore. The sun filtered in through our kitchen window, like it had done 100 times before. But that morning, the light felt different. Gentler, warmer. The kind of light that doesn't demand anything from you. Just quietly says, You made it. Dorian stood at the stove, flipping pancakes, humming something off-key. I leaned against the door frame in an oversized hoodie, barefoot, coffee in hand. Our house still smelled faintly of the wildflowers from our wedding bouquets, now drying upside down in the dining room. It was a modest house, 2 bedrooms, 1 bath, on the outskirts of Flagstaff. Just enough yard for a dog we didn't have yet. Enough quiet to hear our thoughts. It hadn't been handed down, gifted, or subsidized. We paid for it ourselves. It didn't come from peace, but we'd built it with peace in mind. There were no more hushed conversations in corners, no more dread each time my phone buzzed, just wood floors that creaked when I walked, a stack of cookbooks I never finished, and a small cactus in the windowsill that leaned toward the morning light. One afternoon, Dorian and I spent hours assembling a bookshelf we'd bought on sale. The screws didn't quite match the holes. We laughed, argued about instructions, laughed again. When it stood, slightly uneven but proud, I said, "That's us, not flawless, just standing." We filled it with books and framed photos from the wedding. I slid my favorite one into the center, Dorian wiping a tear from my cheek just before I said, "I do." My inbox, though, wasn't as peaceful. Wanda hadn't reached out since the ceremony. Not a word. Not even a masked apology. Marvin had. Again. Another short email that read like a scratched record. "Just checking in. Still miss you." I didn't open it fully. I just forwarded it to Kaylin, my attorney, and archived it. Kendrick? He'd gone radio silent too, but the world hadn't. News of his upcoming wedding at the Ridge spread fast, but it wasn't the admiration he craved. A local lifestyle blogger ran a piece exposing the connection between the fund fraud and Kendrick's charity email scandal. One headline hit harder than I expected. From fund fraud to fake vows, the Gellner family spiral social media tore it apart. Comments rolled in by the hundreds. Why would anyone marry this guy? Must be nice faking broke for a living. I didn't gloat. I didn't share. I just closed the tab and went back to watering the succulents near the kitchen sink. One day, while journaling, I wrote something that surprised me. Family isn't who shares your name, it's who guards your soul. I read it twice before underlining it. Then I added, it's who stands with you when it's easier to turn away. Later that week, Jolene and Drema joined me for brunch downtown. We ordered mimosas and laughed until our cheeks hurt. When the bill came, Drema slid it over without a word and paid. She winked. "I'm investing in your next beginning." Dorian surprised me that night. As I came into the bedroom, there it was, a framed print of our wedding vows hanging just above our bed. He'd highlighted one line, "Love doesn't keep score, but it knows when to walk away." I touched the glass and whispered, "Thank you." Not for the frame, for never making me feel like I was too much or not enough. We weren't broken, just rebuilt. The next morning, we drove out to the local shelter, Hope Circle. They'd helped a woman I once mentored get away from an emotionally abusive family situation. That stuck with me. We'd agreed to donate the remaining $6,000 from our wedding fund. Inside the modest building, a counselor greeted us with warm hands and kind eyes. "I can't tell you how much this will help," she said, voice thick with gratitude. "Would you like to leave a message with the donation?" I thought for a moment. Then, steady and sure, I said, "Tell them, healing doesn't mean forgetting. It means remembering who you are, without apology." She nodded, and I felt something in my chest, like a knot finally loosening. As we walked back to the car, Dorian squeezed my hand. "No regrets?" he asked. I smiled. "Only one," I said, "that I didn't let go sooner." Before we end, I want to leave you with this, not as a victim, but as someone who found her voice in the noise. If there's one thing this experience taught me, it's this. You don't owe loyalty to pain just because it shares your last name. Family is not who demands from you, manipulates you, or punishes you for choosing yourself. Family is who honors your peace, even when it costs them their pride. And choosing peace, no matter how late, is never weakness. It's wisdom. I share my story not to reopen old wounds, but to help someone else close theirs. So if you're watching this and you're in a space where your boundaries are being dismissed, where love comes with guilt, or where silence feels safer than truth. I hope this reminds you. You're not crazy and you're not alone. Let me ask you something. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you were told you had to love? What did that decision teach you? Or maybe you're still in that place now, wondering if it's okay to let go. Tell me where you're watching from and drop a 1 inch in the comments if this story touched something real in you. I read everyone. And hey, if this story moved you, helped you reflect, or simply reminded you that healing is possible, please don't forget to hit that subscribe button. This channel is where real voices find space to be heard, where stories like mine, and maybe yours, matter. Hi, I'm Carolyn. I used to think family meant safety, until mine burned my lottery check, called me a freeloader, and kicked me out into a snowstorm. They mocked my Christmas gift, then tried to take credit when it turned out I'd won $2.5 million. They didn't just laugh at me, they erased me. So tell me, how do you heal from a betrayal that wears your last name? Because what they did next was worse. Want to hear it? I had barely stepped through the door when I knew I shouldn't have come. The smell of cinnamon and ham filled the house, but it was missing something. Or maybe I was the missing part. I kicked off my snow-covered boots at the mat, clutching the small paper bag like it held something sacred. My fingers were red from the cold, but no one offered me a towel. Or a hello. I could hear my mother's voice from the living room, mid-sentence, laughing. And she made it from scratch. The crust was just perfect. Blythe always had a hand for detail. Of course. I hovered for a moment in the hallway, waiting. Nothing. No one even looked up when I walked into the room. The fire crackled in the hearth, soft jazz floated from the speakers, and my seat, well, it wasn't set. Ginevra looked at me finally. You're late. I brought something, I said, trying to sound casual. I held up the bag. Just something small. Blythe glanced up from her wineglass, smirking. Don't tell me it's another one of your last-minute experiments. I ignored the sting. Scratch-offs, one for each of you. Silence. Not even the kind that holds surprise, just that stale pause before mockery. You bought lottery tickets? Derek chuckled. What is this, white elephant for broke people? Blythe added, Did you find them in the clearance bin? Ginevra didn't even bother to unwrap hers. You know, you could have at least baked something. It's Christmas, not trash day. The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it sliced just the same. I didn't say anything. I set the bag on the coffee table and sat on the edge of the sofa, hands in my lap, listening as they moved on to another conversation. Something about Blythe's new curtains. Something about Derek's fantasy football league. I looked around at the people I was supposed to belong to and felt like a guest no one had invited. Dinner passed without much fanfare. I helped clear the plates while they moved into the den for the annual family photo. I wiped gravy off the counter, rinsed wineglasses, arranged leftovers into mismatched Tupperware. It wasn't until I heard the chorus of "Say cheese" that I realized I hadn't been called. By the time I walked into the den, it was over. The camera was already back in its case. The lights were off. Blythe was texting. Ginevra was adjusting the throw pillows like nothing had happened. Later that night, I saw the photo on Blythe's social media. Everyone was smiling, arms around each other, framed by the tree and the stockings. The caption read, "The ones who matter most this Christmas." I didn't even feel shocked, just hollow. That's the thing no one tells you. Being forgotten doesn't hurt as much as realizing they remembered, and still didn't care. I sat in the upstairs room I always stayed in when I visited. Same faded quilt, same faint smell of cedar and dust. I didn't cry. I just watched the snow fall outside the window, wondering why I kept coming back. Maybe I thought this time would be different. Maybe I hoped they'd look at me and see more than the girl who dropped out of grad school and never got married. Maybe I thought giving them something, even if it was small, meant I could still matter. I opened my coat pocket and pulled out the last ticket. The one I had planned to scratch off with them, maybe laugh about, maybe win $5 on. I looked at it for a long while. Maybe this year Something small could go right. The room was so quiet, I could hear the baseboard heater ticking, a rhythmic little pop and snap like a metronome counting down the seconds of a life I wasn't really living. The overhead light buzzed faintly, but I'd turned it off hours ago. Only the lamp by the bed was still on, casting a soft yellow pool across the old comforter I hadn't changed since I got here. I held the ticket between my fingers, gently, like it was made of tissue or ash. I stared at it, like it might vanish if I blinked too hard. I didn't feel excited, I didn't feel scared. Mostly, I just felt still, like every emotion had been wrung out of me days ago, and I was just waiting to be filled back up with something that wasn't exhaustion. Downstairs, I heard the unmistakable sounds of dessert being enjoyed. Silverware tapping against plates, someone setting down a wine glass too firmly on the table, Blythe's laugh, high, polished, brittle, and Derek's voice rumbling beneath it like a bass note. They were probably talking about granite countertops again, or maybe the ski trip they were planning for January. Aspen or Tahoe, they hadn't decided. Their problems were the kind people liked having. None of it involved me. It never did. Nothing I said ever seemed to reach them. Not in any real way. My stories were nice, my jobs, interesting, my opinions, different. A lifetime of soft put-downs disguised as politeness. And when I gave gifts, they were smiled at and set aside. Not once had anyone ever asked what I liked, or what I wanted for a change. Being around them always made me feel like an extra in a movie they were starring in, necessary to fill a scene, but never part of the actual script. I ran my thumb along the edge of the ticket again. The cardboard had gone warm and pliant, like it had absorbed my hesitation. A weird, quiet intimacy. I reached for the old dime I kept tucked in my wallet, a habit I picked up years ago, back when I'd count out coins in the grocery store aisle, hoping I'd have enough. It was smooth and worn, the face of Roosevelt barely visible anymore. I lined it up against the first square and scratched carefully, deliberately, like I was peeling paint off a wall. The first row, one matching digit. The second, another. My chest tightened. Then I scratched the third. I froze. 3 identical numbers in a row. My fingers hesitated, just for a second. I wanted to tell myself I was imagining it, that I was misreading the symbols, that this was some mistake. But I wasn't blinking. I was wide awake. I scratched the 4th row, and then the 5th. A pattern was forming. Perfect, clean, impossible. I reached for my phone and opened the lottery site, my heart thudding now in a slow, steady beat that felt out of sync with everything else. I typed in the numbers on the back of the card, double-checked, and hit verify. The screen blinked once. Then the number appeared, clear and irrefutable. $25,000. No bells. No whistles. Just a number and a blinking green checkmark, as matter of fact as a weather report. I didn't scream. I didn't leap up. I didn't cry. I sat there, holding the phone in one hand, the ticket in the other, while the heater clicked behind me. The shock didn't hit like lightning. It moved slow, like ice spreading through warm water. A quiet kind of realization that settled into my bones. My first thought wasn't joy. It wasn't even relief. It was, they can't know? Not yet. Not because I wanted to hoard it, or because I was trying to lie, but because I knew what would happen if I said anything. Blythe would laugh at first, pretending it was funny. Then she'd ask questions that weren't really questions. Where did you buy it? Wasn't that the grocery we all go to? Didn't you use Mom's car that day? Wasn't it Christmas Eve, our family celebration? Then Derek would step in, smooth and reasonable, turning facts into favors. You were staying in our guest room, eating at our table, using our electricity. The implication would be there, thinly veiled. It's not just your win. It's shared. They'd wear me down, wrap it all up in guilt and expectation. I'd come out the other side with a slice of something that had been wholly mine, reduced to crumbs. They wouldn't even realize they were doing it. Or maybe they would. I honestly didn't know which was worse. I stood up and crossed the room to the dresser. The mirror above it was cloudy, the glass old, the frame chipped. I looked at my reflection. My face looked the same, but nothing else was. My life had just split in two, the one I'd been stuck inside, and the one I could now walk into. I set the ticket on the bed, smoothing it flat. Then I opened the drawer and pulled out my notebook, the one I wrote in when I needed to make sense of things. I flipped past pages of notes that no longer mattered. Shopping lists, reminders to call insurance, a recipe for lentil soup I never tried. On a clean page, I wrote, Montana State Lottery Office Address. Look up, verify twice. Bus 14 departs 9:10 a.m. Arrives Helena 1:45 p.m. Bring ID, routing plus account number, signed ticket. Do not tell anyone. My handwriting looked calm. Neat, almost detached, like I was planning a trip to the grocery store, not preparing to rewrite my entire future. But inside, something had shifted. It wasn't joy, not yet. It wasn't even freedom, but it was the absence of dread. And that felt new. I slid the ticket into the pages of an old paperback. The shipping news, I think. Something no one in this house would bother to open. Then I placed the book deep inside my canvas tote, zipped it shut, and covered it with a rolled sweater and a pair of socks. The heater clicked off again. Silence returned, clean and cold. My phone buzzed. It was my mother. Don't forget to do the dishes before bed. No, thank you for the scarf I spent 3 evenings knitting. No, it was nice to see you. Just another directive, another duty, just like always. I looked down at the screen, then back up at the mirror. I saw the same tired face they always said looked ungrateful, the same mouth they said talked back, the same eyes they never really looked into when I spoke. But something had changed. They had no idea, and I wasn't going to tell them. Not yet. Maybe not ever. The next morning, I woke early. Not because I had anything to look forward to, but because the smell of bacon and burnt toast wafted through the vents, dragging me out of a shallow sleep. I dressed slowly, pulled my hair back into a loose knot, and headed down to the kitchen like I always did. Quietly, like a guest who'd overstayed. They were already seated. Ginevra at the head, as always, reading from her phone while Blythe scrolled through hers. Derek was slouched in his chair, chewing loudly, and Howard, well, he was stirring his coffee like it was a task he resented. No one looked up when I entered. I poured myself some black coffee and stood for a moment, holding the mug between my hands, letting the heat settle into my fingers. Ginevra glanced up finally. Hope you washed your hands before touching anything. I didn't respond. I sat down at the far end of the table, furthest from the window, and began buttering a piece of dry toast. They continued chatting like I wasn't there. Have you heard about that lottery thing? Ginevra said suddenly, scrolling. Somebody in Missoula won $2.5 million off a scratch-off. Christmas miracle, I guess. Derek snorted. Wouldn't that be a hell of a twist? Imagine if it was someone like Carolyn. Blythe laughed, flipping her hair. She did bring us those charming little charity cards. I kept eating. Ginevra looked directly at me. You still have yours, don't you? I set my fork down slowly, met her gaze. Yes. The table went silent, just for a second, but long enough. That's not funny, Blythe said, but her tone shifted. She was listening now. Derek leaned in. Wait, you actually still have it? I gave a small shrug. I do. That silence stretched again, sharp, intrusive. Ginevra folded her hands. Well, if it turns out you're holding the winner, I think we all know what that means. I tilted my head. What does it mean? She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. It means we share. You didn't get that ticket on your own. You came here for Christmas. You stayed in our home, ate our food, used our water, our heat. I mean, that ticket was part of a gift exchange. It belongs to everyone. Yeah, Blythe jumped in. It was like a group thing, part of the family celebration. I stared down at my toast. I didn't see it that way. Derek chimed in. I've got a truck payment behind 3 months, and the roof's leaking at Mom's. So, if it is the winter, don't start acting brand new. I set my mug down carefully. I haven't claimed anything. I just said I still have it. Ginevra leaned forward. Don't play coy. You need to remember who's always been here. We've put up with a lot, Carolyn. You've lived off this family for years. I haven't lived here in over a decade. You always come back when it suits you. You take. You never give. Even now, you're sitting on something, and you think you don't owe us a piece? I stood up slowly. I don't owe you anything. Ginevra stood too. If you think you're going to take what belongs to this family and walk away, you've got another thing coming. I didn't yell. I didn't break. I simply walked out of the kitchen. Upstairs, I locked the door to my room. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. Just adrenaline. I sat on the edge of the bed and exhaled hard, staring at the crack in the wall I'd always hated as a kid. I whispered it aloud, just to hear it. This is why I didn't tell them. The ticket was still in my bag, untouched since last night. I didn't even pull it out to double-check. I didn't need to. I knew now that nothing had changed. Not really. Money didn't make me valuable. It just made me a threat. Later that evening, just after the sun dropped behind the frozen ridge, a knock came at my door. I stayed still. After a pause, Ginevra's voice cut through. You don't have to say anything. Just bring the check down when it arrives. Let's not make this messy. I didn't respond. I didn't move. Instead, I stood slowly, walked to the door, and slid the deadbolt into place. The next day passed in a strange fog. I kept to myself, stayed out of the kitchen, and only came downstairs to refill my thermos with coffee. I didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing me unravel, or worse, beg for space that should have always been mine. By late afternoon, I took my tote and walked to the library. Not to read. Just to sit where nobody expected anything from me. I found a table by the window, opened a random book, and let the silence breathe around me. It was there, in the stale hum of fluorescent lights and muffled page-turning, that my phone buzzed with a message from Ginevra. Dinner tonight, just family. Let's start fresh. 7 p.m. That was it. No, how are you? No apology for the things she'd said, or how she'd tried to wrap entitlement in a lecture about sacrifice. Just a calendar invitation to perform forgiveness. I stared at the message, deleted it, then scrolled back and read it again. I didn't say yes. I just showed up. It was already dark when I walked in. The house had been scrubbed of tension, at least on the surface. Table set like a magazine spread. Candles. Napkins folded like some hotel wedding rehearsal. I knew better than to believe it was for me. Ginevra stood in the kitchen, apron on, holding a roast chicken like it was an offering. Her smile looked tight. I'm glad you came, she said. Blythe turned from the hallway. We even saved your seat this time. Her voice was too high, too rehearsed. I nodded, took off my coat, and hung it by the door. I didn't bother asking what the occasion was. I already knew it wasn't about reconciliation. It was about optics. We sat. Forks scraped plates. Conversations tiptoed around anything real. I've been thinking, Ginevra said, slicing into the pie she'd brought from the bakery. We've all said things that didn't come out right. But we're still a family, right? No one responded. She laid a slice of apple pie in front of me. Then, just as my fork touched the edge of the crust, she reached into a drawer and pulled out a tan envelope. She slid it next to my plate like it was a napkin. Just a little something to make things clear. It's cleaner for taxes this way. I didn't open it. Just take a look when you're ready, she added. Nothing dramatic, just fairness. I pushed the envelope aside, still untouched. Then I looked her in the eye. Fairness? She blinked. Well, yes. It just outlines how we could divide things. You know, so nobody feels left out. You're not planning to run off with everything, are you? Blythe chimed in, swirling her wine. It's not about taking. It's about sharing. We've always done things together. Derek finally spoke. It's not that we don't trust you, but it would be crazy not to set expectations now, before anything official happens." I didn't answer. I stood up, pushed the plate back toward the center of the table, untouched. "I'm not hungry." "Carolyn," Ginevra started, "don't be childish. You always do this. You get all worked up." "No," I said, steady. "You always do this. You decorate guilt and call it family." They stared at me like I'd spoken another language. I didn't wait for a reply. I walked out the front door, coat unzipped, the cold slicing through my sleeves. I didn't care. I needed air that didn't feel choreographed. As I reached the edge of the driveway, I pulled out my phone and texted Selby. "I'm ready to move forward." She responded within seconds. "Then let's do it." Back inside that house, I imagined Ginevra shaking her head, muttering something about me being too proud, too sensitive, too selfish. Maybe she even said it out loud. She thinks she's above family now. No, I just stopped lowering myself to be part of one that never included me. By the time the first soft launch night came around, the paint on the walls of Carolyn's table had barely dried. The sign outside still smelled like pine from the carpenter's truck. We kept the lights dim, the playlist low, and the front door unlocked, just enough to let in curiosity, but not enough to announce anything bold. I stood behind the espresso counter, wiping down the machine, even though it didn't need it. Selby was sorting through the reservation cards. I'd asked her to keep it all quiet. No press, no fanfare. Let the food do the talking. "Tonight's mostly neighborhood people and 2 invitees from the community board," she said without looking up. I nodded. "Let's just observe. No introductions. Let them guess." The door chimed around 6:40. 2 women I vaguely recognized from a city cleanup event stepped in. Then a retired teacher who once failed me in 11th grade. They smiled, took their seats, admired the old brick walls like they hadn't always been here, hidden behind decades of drywall and dust. Then they arrived. I didn't see them at first, just heard the voice. Ginevra's. Loud enough to be polite, just enough edge to command space. "Oh, how charming," she said, walking in behind a woman from the Rotary Club. "It's small, but I suppose cozy is the trend now." Blythe followed close behind, glancing around with that uptight smirk she saved for estate sales and bad furniture stores. Derek trailed behind, hands shoved in his coat pockets like he'd rather be anywhere else. They didn't see me. Ginevra leaned toward the hostess stand. "We're with the council invite. She said we'd be fine to join." Selby glanced at me, then back at them. "Of course. We have a table for 3 near the window." Ginevra chuckled. "Imagine if that freeloader of a daughter ended up in a place like this. Wouldn't that be something?" I didn't flinch. Just kept steaming milk for a cappuccino like I'd done it 1,000 times. Because I had. Not in some glamorous barista course, but through trial, error, and YouTube tutorials with bad lighting. This wasn't magic. It was muscle memory. The room filled gradually. Quiet conversations hummed. Laughter bounced off the ceiling beams. I stayed behind the counter, letting the night carry itself. Then the mayor walked in. He didn't need to be here, but he showed up anyway, smiling like he meant it. He crossed the room, nodding at patrons, and made a straight line for me. "Carolyn," he said, shaking my hand. "Congratulations again. This place has your fingerprints all over it." His voice wasn't loud, but it carried. Every fork paused midair. Ginevra turned, as if someone had slapped her with a warm towel. Blythe's wine glass trembled just enough to spill a drop onto the linen napkin. I stepped around the counter, smoothing my apron. "Welcome," I said to the mayor, then glanced at the 3 of them. "Table for 3? Ginevra didn't answer. Derek looked at the floor. Blythe cleared her throat. "We didn't realize this was yours," Ginevra said finally, blinking like someone trying to focus in the dark. I smiled, not cruelly, just enough to let her know I'd seen everything I needed to. "Well, now you do," I said. "Enjoy your evening." I turned to walk away, but Ginevra reached out, fingers curling slightly toward my arm. "Carolyn, maybe we could talk sometime. About Maybe you're hiring? I looked at her, then at Blythe, who was suddenly very interested in the breadbasket. All applicants go through the same process, I said evenly. If you'd like to apply, Selby handles HR. We don't do shortcuts, even for family. Blythe scoffed, her voice low but audible. Seriously? You'd make us apply like strangers? No, I said, meeting her gaze. Like adults. Selby approached then, folder in hand, and gently redirected them to their table. The night moved on. Dishes were cleared. Dessert was served. They ate, because they were too proud not to, but they didn't stay for coffee. After the last guest left, I sat at the front window with a mug in hand, staring out at the empty streetlights flickering over snow. My phone buzzed. A friend of Selby's had written a blog post. New cafe in Missoula is run by a quietly brilliant woman with a sharp edge and a soft center. I whispered to myself, just to feel the words out loud. I've waited my whole life for someone to see both. The night after the cafe's soft launch, I didn't go home. I stayed at Selby's, slept on her pull-out couch with a blanket that smelled like lavender and strong detergent. In the morning, she handed me coffee in a chipped mug and asked if I was ready for the final prep inspection. I said yes, but something tugged at me. I needed to grab my tax documents, still tucked away in my old bedroom. It was early January. The sidewalks were still crusted with half-melted ice, the sky that colorless gray that makes you question if the sun ever really existed here. By the time I got to the house, the windows were dark, but the porch light was on. It looked exactly the same and nothing like home. I stepped inside without knocking. It was quiet, the kind of silence that wasn't peaceful, just empty. I slipped off my boots, walked toward the kitchen, and stopped cold. The usual pile of mail wasn't on the counter. Ginevra sat at the table alone, a nearly empty mug in front of her, steam long gone. She didn't look up, but the faint scent of something acrid hit me. Burnt paper, like the edge of a candle wick snuffed out too late. I dropped my bag on the floor. Did anything come from the lottery office? She finally looked at me. Her lips twitched, just slightly, like she had rehearsed what she'd say. You mean this? She reached beside her and held up a corner of scorched cardstock. The check, blackened on one side, curling at the edges. I took care of it. My jaw clenched. You burned it? That money was never going to do anything good for this family, she said, like she was explaining a casserole recipe gone wrong. It would have changed things, destroyed what little we still have. Blythe's voice floated from the top of the stairs. We don't need your dirty millions, Carolyn. You think money makes you better than us now? I didn't answer. I walked further into the kitchen. Derek came in from the back door, snow still on his shoulders. You live here. You eat here. You act like a queen walking through a castle you didn't build. I stared at Ginevra. You stole from me. She stood up, slow, deliberate. You walked into this house. That makes everything in it ours. You want to leave with your check? Fine. But you don't take this family's name and pretend you earned something on your own. There was no fire in her voice, just that dead certainty she always used when she decided she was right. I turned without a word, walked to my room, and closed the door behind me. The walls hadn't changed, still had the thumbtack holes from posters I'd taken down years ago. I grabbed a duffel from the closet and stuffed what I could into it. Some jeans, toiletries, that worn sweater I kept meaning to replace. As I zipped the bag, footsteps stopped outside my door. Ginevra's voice came through like a snake under a doorframe. If you walk out now, don't think you can come crawling back. I opened the door slowly. That's the first thing you've said that I agree with. We locked eyes. Hers didn't soften. I brushed past her, walked through the hall like I'd walked it my whole life. Only this time, I didn't look back. Outside, the cold bit harder than I expected. I hadn't taken a coat, just a scarf and thin gloves. My car had been parked blocks away, still with a dead battery. So I walked. Half a mile in, My fingers stopped burning. That's when you know you're in trouble. Not when you feel pain, but when you stop feeling anything at all. A porch light flicked on as I passed a neighbor's home. Mrs. Whitmore. She had always left cookies on our doorstep when I was a kid. She opened her door halfway and called out, "You okay, honey?" I managed a small nod, though I doubt it convinced her. She stepped out in slippers. "You look like you've been out there too long. Come on in, warm up. Do you need a phone?" "I have mine," I said, voice hoarse. Could I borrow a charger?" She smiled softly and held the door open wider. I sat inside her mudroom while the phone charged on a small side table. The warmth crept back into my skin slowly, pins and needles lighting up my palms. When the screen lit up, a new message appeared. "Selby. Tomorrow's inspection is early. We ready?" I typed back without hesitating. "Let's make this place real." I'd lost the check, but I hadn't lost my name. 3 weeks passed quietly. Quiet in the way a storm sometimes is when it's building just beneath the surface. Carolyn's table had started picking up steam. A blogger from Spokane called it the kind of place that feels like it was made for you, even if no one ever made room before. Customers lingered. Staff smiled more. There was, for the first time in a long while, air in my lungs that didn't feel borrowed. Then the noise started. Selby caught it first. She walked in mid-morning, phone in hand, her brows pressed together. "There's a thread in a local Facebook group, a long one." I looked up from the order forms. "And?" "It's about you and the cafe." I reached for her phone and scrolled. Accusations, anonymous comments, rumors. She pushed her family aside to play entrepreneur. Heard she used money that wasn't even hers. Ask her who really helped her get this place off the ground. Near the bottom. Trust me, I know her. I'm related. That one hit differently. By the end of the day, 2 bookings had canceled. A supplier asked to confirm our licensing again. One of the staff mentioned getting DMs from someone named Marcy Bell, warning them not to trust the boss lady too much. The name didn't hit me right away. That evening, Selby and I stayed late to review system logs. Bookings had been tampered with. Duplicate entries, emails rerouted, vendor contacts suddenly disconnected. We pulled the admin access report. The IP address was from inside the cafe. Same terminal used by Blythe's workstation. Blythe. She had applied under the name Marcy Bell just after we announced our open hiring event. She'd submitted a resume from a Gmail address I didn't recognize, listed references I never bothered to check. She worked quietly, never late, never too eager. I'd taken it as humility, but now I saw it for what it was. Camouflage. "Call her in," I told Selby. 10 minutes later, Blythe sat across from me in the back office, her arms crossed, expression unreadable. "You've been working here under a fake name," I said. "That's not illegal," she replied. "It is when you use it to alter business records." Her face twitched, but she held her ground. "I didn't alter anything. I was helping. You were drowning and didn't even know it. I figured you'd thank me. By sabotaging reservations? By sending messages to my staff accusing me of stealing?" "I didn't. I have logs, Blythe. Screenshots, server access trails, every login." She said nothing. I leaned forward. "You didn't just lie. You walked into my life like a thief. You used my name to smear me. And for what? So I'd hand you a piece of something I built?" She blinked rapidly. "We're family, Carolyn." "No, we're history." I walked out of the office and called a staff meeting. The team gathered in the front, confusion turning to quiet fury as I showed them the evidence. Emails, logs, even a recorded message Blythe had sent to a vendor, claiming I had mental issues and was not fit to run anything. She stood at the edge of the room, silent now, shrinking. "I need everyone to know," I said, voice steady. "This business is built on honesty, and this betrayal doesn't reflect on any of you. But it won't be ignored." Selby handed her a formal notice of termination. Blythe didn't say a word. just took the envelope and walked out through the back door. That night, a message pinged on my phone. Ginevra, you always were dramatic. I deleted it before finishing the sentence. The next morning, Selby dropped a folder on my desk as I reviewed the new hiring budget. It was thick, tabbed with highlighter notes. Payroll audit, she said. Started it last week just in case. I flipped the folder open. Her finger tapped one name on the list. A part-time kitchen staffer, someone we'd hired through Blythe's recommendation. There's a discrepancy. Hours billed don't match shift logs. Cash payouts through side jobs that don't exist. Looks like the sabotage didn't end with her. I stared at the page. I think they were testing how far they could go, Selby said. Looks like they were planning something bigger. I nodded slowly. Let's make sure whatever they started ends here. I spent the next 2 hours combing through every line in the payroll folder Selby handed me. She sat across the desk, legs crossed, tapping a pen against her knee in slow, even rhythm. The name that kept popping up didn't ring any bells, not until I checked the emergency contact listed on the new hire forms. A burner phone number tied to an address in Blythe's neighborhood. Of course. The person Blythe vouched for, the one padding hours and slipping cash through fake shift logs, wasn't just a mistake. It was a setup. One meant to bleed the business dry before I had a chance to fully stand on my own feet. Security footage? I asked. Selby nodded. Already pulled. We walked to the back room, the one that doubled as storage and our tiny server space. She queued up the feed from last Thursday. At first, it was just routine. Me unlocking the register, staff prepping, delivery drop-offs. Then, around 8:42 p.m., Blythe, who had been officially terminated a week prior, walked in through the service entrance. She knew the keypad code. She walked straight to the safe, keyed it open like she owned the place, pulled out what looked like a stack of 20s, and tucked them into a to-go bag she'd brought with her. No flinching, no hesitation, just calm, calculated theft. I didn't say anything. Selby stopped the video. We can report this. We should. I nodded once. Call the police. There was no dramatic music, no shouting match, no slamming doors. Just the quiet resolve that comes when you know you're finally done handing out warnings. By lunchtime, the officers arrived. They didn't come in with flashing lights or raised voices. They came in plain clothes, walked directly to the table where Blythe was now seated, somehow back in the cafe again, like a ghost that refused to stay gone. She didn't resist, just blinked slowly, face flushed as they read her the charges. Fraud, trespassing, theft. I didn't do anything, she said, voice wavering. This is a mistake. She's lying. I stepped forward, calm. I have the login records, surveillance footage, the tampered invoices, and the name you used to hire a fake employee. One of the officers glanced at me. That'll be enough. As they walked her past the tables, one of the regulars turned his head. That your sister? He whispered. No, I said. That's someone I used to know. Blythe's eyes welled up. Carolyn, please, don't let them do this. I didn't move. Save it for the judge. Later that afternoon, I sat back in my office, door closed, blinds drawn halfway. Selby came in with 2 cups of coffee and handed me one like we were in a silent ritual. My phone buzzed. Ginevra. I didn't open the message. I just read the preview. How could you do this to your own blood? I laughed quietly. Not bitter, just tired. Then I called her. She picked up immediately. So now you're too good for the rest of us? No, I said. I just stopped pretending you were any good for me. She went quiet. I didn't do anything to Blythe, I continued. She did it to herself. I'm not the villain here. I just stopped covering for the ones who are. You're still a part of this family, whether you like it or not, she snapped. No, I was never part of this family. I was the help, the placeholder, the shadow you blamed when the mirror cracked. I ended the call before she could respond. That evening, as the cafe closed for the night, I lingered in my office, lights low, a chair pulled toward the window. The The space felt bigger without her in it. Lighter. A voicemail landed a few minutes after close. A reporter. Miss Rowan, we're running a piece on small business resilience. We'd love your insight, especially with your story. I let it play to the end, then replayed it again. This time, listening not to the words, but to the weight of them. Resilience. They always use that word like it's a compliment. But sometimes it just means you were the only one left standing because everyone else stepped on you. I whispered to the dark, this isn't about being tough. It's about surviving what should have never happened. The issue with being called resilient is that people say it like it's praise, when what they really mean is, you survived things we wouldn't have. There was a photo of me in the local magazine that ran the feature. I was holding a cup of coffee, smiling, though I don't remember actually smiling. The caption read, "Strength isn't always loud." I tore out the page and tucked it in a drawer. Not to frame, not to share, just to keep. A reminder, maybe, that sometimes the quiet ones write the ending too. That afternoon, I let the crew go early. The cafe had run smoothly all week, and the Friday air had turned warm enough to leave the door open without a draft. Selby gave me a wink on her way out. You earned this lull. It was close to 5 when the phone rang. The landline. Almost nobody used it. I picked up on the second ring. Carolyn! Ginevra's voice cracked like it was stitched together from cigarettes and shame. I didn't answer. I don't know what else to say, she went on. She's gone. Derek moved. I haven't heard from him in weeks. People keep asking me questions I don't have answers to. There was a pause, just long enough for her to be hoping I'd break the silence. Just call me if you want to talk, she added. Or don't. I tried. The line went dead. I didn't feel rage. I didn't feel pity either. I just felt still, like I had finally stepped out of a shadow I didn't know had been over me for decades. That night, the staff stayed late to clean and restock. I offered to handle it, but they wouldn't let me. Selby dragged out a small chocolate cake from the back fridge, the cheap kind with the plastic lid and airbrushed lettering that read, "We see you." It wasn't fancy, but it knocked the air out of me in a way no betrayal ever had. Not out of pain, out of recognition. We figured it's time someone celebrated you, Selby said, placing one hand on my shoulder. I didn't cry. I laughed. Then I bit into the cake with the plastic fork they handed me, sitting cross-legged on the tile floor between 2 crates of paper cups. I'm not invisible here, I said. Never were, one of the kitchen girls replied. When they finally left and the lights dimmed, I stepped outside. The wind was soft for once, brushing against my face like it didn't mean to hurt me. I walked a block down to the edge of the trees, the same spot I'd stood when I left my mother's house all those weeks ago. I closed my eyes and whispered it into the quiet. You burned the check, but I kept my name. That was always mine. I breathed in deep. No one else was around, no one to hear it but me. And that was enough. I wasn't angry. I just didn't owe her my silence anymore, or my return. Some things you don't fix. Some things aren't supposed to be mended. They're meant to be left behind, the way you leave a pair of shoes that never quite fit right, no matter how much you tried to stretch them. Back at the cafe, the voicemail light on the machine blinked. A reporter I hadn't met before. Ms. Rowan, we'd love to include you in a piece about women business owners who've overcome personal hardship. You've become a symbol of resilience in the community. Would you be willing to talk? I let the message play twice. Then a third time. Resilience. Again with that word. I sat down at the counter, turned off the lights, and stared into the streetlight glow dancing on the polished floor. This isn't about resilience, I whispered, barely moving my lips. It's about survival, and finally choosing myself. I didn't return the call. I didn't need to, because for once in my life, I wasn't proving anything. I was just living. Hi! My name is Lark. They told me it was just a bruise, then left me limping through a canyon tour for 3 hours. Said I was being dramatic, again. Then they went to brunch, while I sat alone in a hotel room, ankle fractured, Name erased from the insurance list, replaced by my cousins. They didn't forget me. They planned around me. Now they're calling me the one who destroyed the family. But if all I did was tell the truth, why are they so scared? And why did it take a stranger's video to prove I was ever there at all? I stood there, gripping the strap of my overnight bag, while they all loaded into the van. Marlo was in the driver's seat, sunglasses on, tapping his phone like the rest of us didn't exist. Velda glanced at me once, just long enough to frown and ask, "You're not wearing that, are you?" No hello, no smile. Just critique, like clockwork. I should have known better than to expect anything different. The air was heavy with the kind of silence that comes when people pretend nothing's wrong. And still, I stood there, trying to find a space for myself in a trip that clearly had no room for me. I hoisted the bag into the trunk myself. No one moved to help. Not even a shift of weight. Just eyes locked on screens or away from me. I climbed into the van last. Velda sighed. "You could have been ready 10 minutes ago." Never mind that I'd been standing outside before anyone else. I slid into the seat behind the middle row. It was crammed and hot. I asked quietly if I could switch to the back to sit with Haley. Velda turned around like I'd insulted the Pope. "Can you not start with the drama this early?" Marlo snorted. "Just put her with the bags. She can't complain about legroom if she's already part of the luggage." That wasn't a joke. It was a sentence I'd heard versions of my whole life. By the time we hit the first gas station off I-35, the van smelled like snacks and stale judgment. I got out to stretch and walked gingerly on my right foot. It had been sore since yesterday. I wasn't sure if I'd twisted something, or if it was just the concrete floors from work, but I felt it every time I took a step. I mentioned it once, while Velda browsed the aisle of vitamin water, like it held answers to world peace. "I think I might have strained something in my foot." She didn't look up. "You're always like this. One small thing, and it becomes Shakespeare." She grabbed her drink and walked away. I stood there, alone in the middle of the convenience store, with a dull ache growing in my leg and a sharper one setting into my chest. I didn't say anything else the rest of that stop. Back in the van, I closed my eyes and tried not to think about the way Marlo kept glancing at me through the rearview mirror. Like I was a loaded gun, he didn't trust not to go off. The road stretched out forever. The kind of endless you can only feel in a van full of people who treat you like static. I remembered being 9, twisting my ankle at that birthday party. No adult helped me. Velda rolled her eyes and said, "If you can cry, you can walk." So I walked on a hairline fracture for 3 days. The only ice I got came in my soda. That's when I learned the trick. If you don't cry, they can't call you dramatic. It didn't mean you weren't hurting. It just meant they didn't have a reason to mock you out loud. I stopped crying that year. Not because the pain got better, but because no one ever came when I did. The scenery changed somewhere near the Utah border. The hills outside the window felt unfamiliar and unforgiving. My phone buzzed. Low battery. I reached for my mom's iPad in the side pouch and pulled up the itinerary. My name was listed near the bottom, misspelled. Lara. Not a big mistake, right? Just a typo. But when you're already the last person they packed for, when your snacks didn't make the grocery list, when your name is always an afterthought or a punchline, seeing it wrong again felt like the final punctuation mark on a lifetime of being overlooked. I didn't say anything. I didn't correct it. I just closed the iPad and stared at the road. The van slowed as we turned onto a gravel path leading toward the rental lodge. Marlo muttered something about bad directions, and Velda launched into commentary about how things used to be better planned when Dad was alive. I unbuckled too early, grabbing for my bag in the trunk space behind the last row. I was tired of waiting for someone to notice I existed. I figured I'd just move. The moment I stepped down, my foot caught uneven gravel. Pain shot up my leg like a fire line, and my body gave out before I could say a word. I dropped fast, hard, landing on my hip and elbow, and none of them even turned around when I fell. The gravel bit into my knees as I tried to stand. My left leg could take weight, but the right, something wasn't right. My ankle felt like it had come unhinged from the rest of me, like it was floating and throbbing all at once. I gritted my teeth and pushed myself upright, trying to mask the sound that almost came out of me. No one turned around. Not Marlo. Not Velda. Not even Haley, who was closest. I limped toward them, dragging my bag behind me, like it weighed more than I did. Velda glanced back once. "Come on, we're late for check-in," she said, as if I'd been dilly-dallying at the gift shop. Marlo didn't even pause his steps. He was already halfway to the lodge, arguing with the GPS on his phone. Inside, the air conditioning was set way too high for how cold my body already felt. The woman at the front desk smiled and handed over 3 room keys. Velda turned to me and said, "We're all in one unit. You can take the sofa bed." Then she tossed a key at me like she was feeding a dog. I nodded. "Because what else do you do?" Later that morning, we walked out toward the trail for the first tour. The park ranger talked about keeping hydrated and staying on marked paths. I was still limping, but quietly. Every step sent a ripple of pain up my shin, but I told myself to breathe through it. I wasn't going to give them any reason to say I was being dramatic. The canyon was massive. Terracotta cliffs and sharp ledges that made the wind whistle louder than usual. I pulled out my phone, tried to snap a photo near the edge, just to have something that wasn't ugly from this trip. And that's when Marlo walked by and gave me a nudge. "Don't fall," he said, laughing. But I did. My foot twisted beneath me, and the next thing I knew, I was on the ground again, this time harder. My phone flew, my sunglasses cracked, my hands scraped against rock. I cried out, instinct, not intention. But it didn't matter. Velda's voice rang out from above me. "Get up, people are watching." I blinked through the pain, my vision spotty. I looked down at my ankle, which was now starting to swell. Purple blooming under the skin, like a bruise that already knew it was permanent. "I can't walk," I muttered. I looked up at Marlo. "I really think I sprained it." He rolled his eyes. "You always say that when you want to sit something out." Velda walked over, hands on hips. "You're making a scene. Can you just breathe through it?" Haley leaned in and whispered, "Try not to cry. Grandma gets annoyed." And so I stood up, on that broken ankle, for them. The trail was long, more than 2 miles round trip, mostly in direct sun, and the ranger wasn't one for stopping often. Every bump in the path, every slope, felt like it was aimed directly at the nerves in my leg. I bit down so hard on my lip that I tasted metal. No one offered me water. Marlo got 2 bottles handed to him. "He looks flushed," Velda said. I limped behind the group like a stray dog they hadn't meant to bring. At one point, I thought about sitting down and refusing to move. But then I imagined Velda's face. Bored, disappointed, maybe even smug. "Told you she'd flake," she'd say. So I kept going. 3 hours. That's how long it lasted. By the time we circled back toward the parking lot, my shirt was stuck to my back, and my ankle had swollen past the top of my sock. I didn't speak. I didn't trust what would come out. We reached a bench. I collapsed onto it, letting my bag drop. Marlo sat a few feet away, scrolling through photos. Velda walked over, unwrapped a sandwich, and handed it to me. "Eat something," she said. "Maybe that'll stop the dramatics." I looked at the food, then at her. My lips parted, but I couldn't form words. Not because I didn't have them, because I had too many. And I realized they weren't going to help me. Not now. Not later. Not ever. As I tried to stand again, the weight sent a sharp crack through my knee. I caught myself before hitting the ground. No one noticed. No one looked. The bench felt like concrete beneath me, but it was the closest thing to relief I'd had all day. My ankle was screaming, my head throbbing, and I could feel sweat drying into a sticky film across my back. When I tried to stand, my leg buckled again, and still, not one of them flinched. Eventually, they wandered toward the parking lot, chatting about dinner plans. Marlo tossed the keycard at me like a frisbee. It landed in the dirt next to my bag. We're heading out to that winery tour. Just rest if you need to. Don't make it a thing. Velda chimed in without stopping. No room service. It's expensive. Then they were gone. I limped behind them to the hotel room, struggling to balance my weight on the opposite leg. No one offered to carry my bag, ask if I needed ice, or even say goodbye. That was the last time I saw any of them for 11 hours. Inside the room, I collapsed onto the edge of the pull-out couch. I didn't bother unfolding it. I peeled off my sock, slowly, carefully, bracing myself for what I already knew. The moment the fabric passed over my ankle, the pain sharpened into something mean. My skin was tight and purple, puffed up around the joint. There wasn't any ice in the room. No painkillers. I didn't have anything except 2 stale granola bars from my backpack and a half-empty water bottle. I texted Velda, "I think this might be serious." It showed, "Read." Nothing came back. I sat for a while, letting the silence fill every corner. The kind of silence that doesn't just mean alone, but forgotten. I thought about calling my mom, not because I believed she'd help, but because some part of me wanted to give her one last chance to prove me wrong. She answered after the 3rd ring. Her voice was loud, like she was at a restaurant. "What now?" I tried to keep my tone level. "My ankle's really swollen. I think I need to see someone, maybe the hospital." She sighed like I just told her steak was overcooked. I swear, every time we try to have a good trip. Then, sharper. "Rest it off, don't make this bigger than it is." And then, click. That click hit louder than any shout ever could. Because it wasn't just the end of a call, it was the confirmation that she still saw my pain as a nuisance, not a concern. I tried Marlo next. He answered. I could hear people laughing behind him. "You're okay, Lark. You just need to stop spiraling." "I'm not spiraling. I'm in pain. It's turning colors." "You cried when Dad changed the Wi-Fi password," he said, like that was proof of something. "You have a history." Then he hung up too. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't break anything. Instead, I plugged in my phone, opened the Notes app, and started writing. Not for them. For me. March 12th, 4:47 p.m. Pain level 810. Swelling present. No support offered. Keycard thrown. Text ignored. Call dismissed. No attempt to assess injury. No medication provided. Left unsupervised. I started a new entry every few hours, documenting everything. When I ate, when I tried to stand, when the throbbing shifted. I took pictures. Angles, timestamps, close-ups. I wasn't sure who I was gathering it for yet, but I knew why. If no one else was going to believe me, I'd build a story they couldn't deny. I sat there for hours. The light in the room shifted from gold to gray. Outside, I could hear other families laughing. Someone knocked at the door down the hall, a voice calling, "Dinner's here," in that cheerful, easy way people have when they're not busy being erased. I opened the camera app, turned it on myself. My face was pale, lips pressed tight. I flipped the camera to my foot, red, swollen, a visual that said more than I ever could with words. I hit record. This is just in case they say it wasn't that bad. After I hit record, I set the phone down on the nightstand. The room was still, the kind of still that doesn't come from peace, but from being completely forgotten. The air conditioner kicked on again. Cold air blew across the back of my neck, and for a second, I felt numb enough to rest. I didn't. Instead, I sat cross-legged on the bed, holding a plastic bag of hotel ice I managed to convince the front desk clerk to give me after I told him I'd twisted something while hiking. I didn't get into details. He didn't ask. He just said, "Rough day?" and handed me the bag with a kind look. That was more compassion than I'd gotten all week. The ice numbed the surface of the skin, but couldn't touch the ache underneath. I rewatched the video I'd just recorded. My voice surprised me. Calm, flat, deliberate. Like a teacher taking attendance. No panic, no drama. Just evidence. Something they couldn't twist later. Then my phone buzzed. A message request. I almost ignored it. Probably spam. But then I saw the name. Sloane Bixby. She wasn't someone I'd call a friend. We went to the same high school, had the same homeroom sophomore year. That was it. But she was the kind of girl who saw everything even when she never said much. Her message read, "I saw your name in a comment on Marlo's post. Just wanted to say, you were always treated like crap by your family. We all saw it. I'm sorry." I stared at it longer than I should have. Not because it hurt, but because it didn't. It was strange how something could sting and soothe at the same time. This wasn't sympathy, it was confirmation. Someone else had noticed. Someone else remembered the way Velda used to show up to parent-teacher conferences, acting like she ran the school. The way Marlo would mock me in front of the class, and the teachers would laugh along because, well, siblings tease. And the way I always ended up sitting alone during group projects. I'd spent most of my life thinking I was overreacting. Or worse, making it up. I opened a new note on my phone and titled it, "They Always Knew." Underneath, I began listing moments. Tiny ones, but real. Mr. Carlson pausing when I limped into English class with no excuse note, our neighbor, Mrs. Fields, offering to walk me home when I was 12, and Velda practically slamming the door in her face. The camp counselor, who asked if I was feeling safe at home after I refused to swim with the group. None of them had done anything, but they had seen something. Maybe they thought someone else would step in. Maybe they didn't know what to say. But they knew. I scrolled back up to Sloane's message and typed a reply. "Thank you." That's all I said, and it was enough. After that, I leaned back into the pillows and let my brain wander where it hadn't dared to go in years. I remembered 8th grade, field day. It was hot, and I hadn't eaten breakfast. I passed out during the tug of war. When I came to, the nurse told me my mom had said I was just dramatic, and that I'd probably faked it to get out of the race. That's what she told the principal, too, and I believed her. That day, and so many others like it, I believed that my body was a liar, that my pain was suspect, that being tired or dizzy or scared meant I was trying to manipulate someone. The truth is, I wasn't fragile. I was trained to doubt my own signals. It hit me all at once. The worst part wasn't that they neglected me. It was that they made me question whether I even deserved better. That night, lying there with the hum of the mini-fridge in the corner and the glow of the bedside lamp, I realized something. I wasn't angry anymore. Not in the way I used to be. The kind of anger that makes you want to prove your worth. That's the kind that keeps you tied to them, hoping if you shout loud enough, someone will finally hear. But what I felt now was sharper, cleaner. I didn't want them to understand me anymore. I just wanted them to lose the privilege of defining me. I opened the Notes app again and added one more line under "They Always Knew." Me. Now. Then I opened the camera one more time. I held the phone at arm's length. My face was tired. Not broken, just done pretending. I hit record and looked directly at the lens. This is for future me, just in case you ever start to wonder again if it was your fault. Morning came slowly, like it was dragging itself across the floor just to find me. I woke to the pressure in my foot, dull and constant, like a warning that never shut up. I sat up, blinked toward the heavy curtains, and waited to see if anyone had texted. Nothing. I checked again. Still nothing. I sent Velda one more message. "I think I need to see a doctor. My foot looks worse." It showed red almost instantly. But that was it. No reply, no call. Just her signature silence, sharp and polished. I called Marlo. It rang 3 times before it cut to voicemail. I didn't bother trying Haley. She'd pretend she didn't see it or blame the bad Wi-Fi. Either way, it would end in silence. They'd gone out again. Winery tour? Something about natural springs. I remembered Velda mentioning it as she was packing sunscreen the day before. And here I was, ankle swollen, alone in a rental suite I wasn't even supposed to be part of. I was starting to think the whole trip was designed around forgetting I existed. I got up, slowly, and hobbled over to the desk to call the front desk downstairs. I asked if there was a local urgent care or walk-in clinic. The woman on the phone was kind, efficient. "There's a clinic about 2 miles out. Do you have insurance on file with us?" I think so," I said, but I already felt the panic creeping in. I opened my folder from the suitcase. Velda had printed everything and handed it to me in a plastic sleeve back home. "We'll handle everything," she'd said. "Just pack and show up." I flipped through the documents, eyes skimming lines I'd seen before. Lodging confirmation, tour schedule, group insurance. Covered travelers, Velda Boone, Marlo Vex, Haley Vex, Ben Vex. No Lark DeVoe. Not even a misspelling. Not even a note. Just absence. I thanked the woman at the front desk and hung up before I could say anything stupid, like cry, or explain, or beg. Back in the room, I dropped the folder on the bed and stared at it. I didn't have the energy to pace, so I just leaned against the wall and tried to process what I was looking at. This wasn't a slip. This wasn't forgetfulness. This was exclusion dressed up as planning. They'd booked me into rooms, added me to dinners, asked me to pitch in for tickets. But when it came to medical coverage, when it came to protecting me if something actually went wrong, I wasn't part of the package, not even on paper. And that hurt in a way I didn't have a word for. Because forgetting someone is one thing, but pretending they were never supposed to be there at all, that's something else entirely. I thought back to 2 days ago. I'd slipped $20 into Haley's bag before the flight, told her it was for snacks, because I knew Velda wouldn't think to pack anything for the kids. And I remember thinking, this is what family does. But now it felt like I'd been running on a definition that nobody else agreed to. Maybe family wasn't shared blood, or holidays, or group photos. Maybe it was something people opt into, and maybe mine had opted out a long time ago. I pulled out the crutches the front desk had offered me the day before. They were too short, wobbly, clearly meant for emergencies, but I used them anyway, moving slowly around the room while I opened the Notes app on my phone. Under the folder they always knew, I started a new entry. They never planned to. I typed, "Today I found proof that I was never protected. Not as a daughter, not as a traveler, not as anything." It wasn't a mistake. It was a map they drew without me on it. I stood there, staring at the screen, the blue cursor blinking like it was waiting for permission. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't text Velda again. Instead, I opened a browser and typed, "How to report medical neglect across state lines." I started reading. Protocols, phone numbers, form titles. Some were easy, some were complicated, but they were there. And for the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt prepared. Just as I was about to click Submit on a form that asked me to describe the situation, a new email popped up on the top of my screen. Subject line, "Request to verify dependent status for student travel insurance coverage. Haley Vex." I froze, because that's when I realized whose name they'd used, and it wasn't mine. I stared at the subject line for a long time before I opened the email. My thumb hovered, my breathing shallow, not out of panic, but of clarity. They'd used Haley's name, not mine. When it came time to assign coverage, define who mattered, check the boxes that legally said, "This person is one of us," they picked someone else. I was just there to fill the space in the photos. I didn't finish the form. I closed the browser, pushed the laptop aside, and grabbed my phone. This time, I didn't document for them. I didn't cry into the lens, hoping someone would come save me. I sat at the desk, straight-backed, facing the window with light cutting through the blinds like a courtroom spotlight. I opened the voice memo I'd recorded the night before and listened to it once. I sounded scared, careful, like I was asking permission to be hurt. That version of me had done what she could. Now I started a new recording. This is Lark DeVoe. I am 32 years old. I was left alone in a hotel out of state by my family after sustaining what I now know is a fractured tibia. No one checked on me. No one offered help. They walked out, knowing I was limping, and never returned. My voice didn't shake. My condition has worsened. I am recording this in case my pain is once again dismissed
or reframed as exaggeration. I saved it, exported it, and sent a copy to a private Google Drive folder labeled Truth, No Edits. Then I did what any sensible adult would do when no one is coming. I got myself to urgent care, no theatrics, no audience. I wrapped my ankle with a clean towel and held it in place using a strip of duct tape I found in the hotel's utility drawer. My step was uneven, but steady enough to reach the curb. I opened my ride app and requested the next available driver. ETA, 7 minutes. When the car pulled up, the driver rolled down the window and gave me a long look. "You okay getting in?" I nodded. "I'll manage." She didn't ask anything else until we were halfway there. "You know," she said gently, "I've driven folks to clinics for everything from sunburn to bullet wounds. You're the first person I've seen limping on a foot like that without someone next to you." I glanced at her. Late 40s, gray sweater, clean dashboard. Her name tag said Clarissa, no wedding ring. Her tone wasn't judgment, it was understanding. "I didn't have a choice," I said. She tapped the turn signal. "Maybe not, but I've learned. When people show you where you stand, believe them." We didn't speak for the rest of the ride. But when she parked, she looked at me again and said, "You know you didn't do anything wrong, right?" I gave a small nod. That moment stayed with me longer than the X-ray. Inside the clinic, the front desk asked the routine questions. Name, date of birth, emergency contact. "None," I said. They looked up. "Are your parents or guardians with you?" "No," I said. "I came alone." The receptionist's expression shifted. Just slightly, but enough to signal something registered. A nurse came out to get me before I'd even finished filling the form. In the exam room, I was told to wait. A few minutes later, they wheeled in a portable X-ray machine and positioned my foot carefully. I winced, but I didn't scream. They took 3 images, then stepped out. When the doctor returned, he didn't ask if it hurt. He just showed me the scan. Fractured tibia. Not displaced, but close. Moderate swelling. They'd caught it before it worsened, but he looked at me over the chart like he wanted to ask how I'd even made it this far without treatment. Instead, he said, "This should have been seen yesterday. You're lucky it didn't shift." That word, lucky, landed funny. I nodded anyway. They gave me a boot brace, a prescription for anti-inflammatories, and instructions to elevate and ice. As I filled out the exit paperwork, I overheard voices at the front desk. Low tones, a phone call. One of the nurses said, "Yes, she's alone, minor. Injury untreated for over 24 hours. I didn't need to ask what that meant. I knew. Mandatory reporting. Turns out you don't need to yell. You just need the right system to whisper on your behalf. I left the clinic limping, prescription bag in one hand, and my pride tucked tight under the other arm. The air smelled cleaner than the hotel, like dust and pine and something fresh. Then my phone buzzed. A voicemail. Velda. I didn't answer, but I listened. Her voice was clipped, professional almost. "Don't do something you'll regret just to make a point." And that's when it hit me. They thought I was bluffing. The message ended, and I slipped the phone back into my pocket without replying. I didn't need to respond. Not yet. I already knew what would be waiting for me on the other side of that voicemail. A mix of guilt-wrapped threats and gentle manipulation disguised as motherly concern. So I didn't rush back to the hotel. I sat down on the bench outside the clinic instead. Just me, a plastic bag of medication, a wrapped foot, and air that finally felt like it didn't belong to someone else's rules. I stared out at the sidewalk, watched the shadows of a row of aspens ripple over the concrete, and let my mind go quiet. No plans, no arguments, no responses. Just stillness. I opened my ride app out of habit, hovered over the Request Ride button, then hit cancel. I wasn't ready to return to 4 walls that reminded me more of a waiting room than a sanctuary. Sometimes you just want the world to slow down, just enough for your breath to catch up to your body. A few minutes passed before I opened the app again and requested a ride. 5 minutes out. Driver, Clarissa. When the car pulled up, it was her. Same calm eyes. Same clean car. This time, she didn't speak when I got in. She helped me load the crutches into the trunk, gave me a look that said, "I remember you," and we pulled off in silence. The kind of silence that doesn't press or punish. Halfway back to the hotel, Clarissa finally broke it. "They let you walk on that?" Her voice was low but not cold. I nodded. Not out of agreement, just acknowledgement. She clicked her tongue, not judging, just processing. Someone should be held accountable. I looked out the window. "They're family!" Clarissa didn't miss a beat. "That's not the same thing as safe." I felt that. Deep. Like a key clicking in a lock I didn't know was jammed. We rode the rest of the way in a kind of knowing quiet. Before I got out, she turned slightly and reached into her glove box. She handed me a small laminated card with a name, number, and the words, Family Survivor Network. "They help people like you," she said. "You don't have to be alone just because they left you." That card felt heavier than it should have. Back in the hotel room, the air was stale. The curtains hadn't moved. The thermostat blinked a tired 72 degrees. But something had shifted in me. I didn't sit down. I didn't collapse. I stood, one crutch under my arm, and opened my phone. Went straight to the folder I'd been building. Not evidence anymore. I changed the name to testimony. And beneath it, I added a new line. First person who believed me, Clarissa. Not family, not blood, but real. I breathed. Then I opened the email app and composed a new message to the organization on the card. I didn't make it long. I didn't explain every detail, just enough. Subject, I need to tell the truth, and I want it to count. Message, my name is Lark DeVoe. I was left behind by family while injured in a different state. I'm no longer interested in hoping they'll do the right thing. I'm interested in doing something right for myself. Can someone speak to me about what happens next? I hit send. Not with anger. With clarity. A knock came at the door not long after. I limped over slowly, opened it with care. The hotel manager stood there, shifting politely on his feet. "There's someone downstairs asking about you," he said. "A woman named Velda." Of course. I thanked him, closed the door, and didn't move for a full minute. Because I knew, she wasn't here to check on my leg. The knock had barely faded when I stepped away from the door, my body bracing on instinct like it always had around her. I gave myself 20 seconds, just enough time to square my shoulders and remember who I was now. Then I unlocked the door. The hotel manager stood aside with the same awkward kindness he'd shown when I first checked in. Behind him, Velda appeared like she was walking into a boardroom. Not a hospital, not a hotel, a room she thought she still owned. "You didn't answer your phone," she said, like that explained the last week of silence between us. She didn't look at my leg. She didn't ask if I was in pain. She didn't even sit down gently, just lowered herself into the chair near the dresser like it was her right. I didn't speak first. I didn't offer water. I waited. "We need to talk," she said, crossing one leg over the other. "Before you do something, you can't walk back." I almost laughed. Couldn't walk back? She had no idea how fitting that was. I sat on the edge of the bed, facing her fully. She didn't like that. She preferred when I kept one foot out of the room, like I was always ready to leave and apologize. "Marlowe's job is at risk," she said flatly. "He said you're threatening legal action. Is that true?" I shrugged. Not because I didn't know the answer, but because it was the only gesture I could offer without adding heat to the room. Her face tightened. "Look, Lark, I know this hasn't been perfect, but you've always been a little sensitive. That's not an insult, it's just, you take things hard." "You mean seriously," I corrected. She tilted her head. "This family's been through a lot. It doesn't help when someone adds fuel." "Funny," I said, "how the people who ignore your voice are always the first to panic when you finally use it." There was no shouting, no tears, just a pause long enough for her to know this version of me wasn't folding. I reached for my phone, opened the file folder I'd curated for days, and tapped send on the email I'd already addressed to her, just waiting in drafts. I watched her phone buzz in her purse. "What's that?" she asked. "Everything." She opened the notification with the same caution you give a letter from the IRS. As her finger scrolled, I saw her jaw lock. In that folder, photos of my ankle, before and after, screenshots of texts ignored, audio clips of my calls to Marlo and Velda, a copy of the group itinerary, insurance list with my name omitted. The video. In case they call me dramatic. Velda's face didn't contort the way I expected. No outrage, just calculation. That scared me more than yelling would have. "This isn't necessary," she said, voice low. "No, it's overdue." She set the phone down, folded her hands. "You could have come to me. We could have talked." "I did," I said, steady. "You called me a problem. Now I'm documenting one." She stood. The chair creaked as it scraped back across the laminate floor. She walked toward the window, touched the curtain like she was adjusting something, then turned around. "What are you trying to prove?" I stared at her, long enough to make her uncomfortable. "I'm not trying to prove anything. I'm just tired of being erased." She didn't respond right away. Her fingers fidgeted with the strap of her purse, then gripped it like a lifeline. "You'll regret this," she muttered, like she'd said it before to someone who had. I didn't flinch. "No, but you might." She paused at the door, one hand still on the knob. Her lips parted, like she was going to try one last guilt tactic, but then she shut them again and walked out. As the door clicked behind her, I sat in the silence, breathing like it was the first real breath in weeks. Sometimes people tell you not to burn bridges, but what they don't say is that some bridges were already ash. You just finally lit the match they were pretending didn't exist. After Velda left, the room felt different. Not lighter, but stripped bare. Like the pretense had finally packed its bags and left with her. I didn't bother turning on the TV. I just sat at the edge of the bed, my foot elevated, the brace wrapped tight, and stared at the unread message count on my phone. 3, then 4. The 5th was from Marlo. I opened it, not because I expected anything new, but because part of me wanted to see how quickly they'd pivot from control to guilt. No greeting, no punctuation, just, "You're really doing this? You're going to ruin all of us over your personal drama?" And then another line. "You need to stop this before it gets out of hand." I didn't react, not immediately. I took a screenshot and saved it to the folder. Label, Threat Number 1, Emotional Manipulation, because that's what it was. A statement meant to intimidate, cloaked in family language. I thought back to the first time he'd used that tone. I was 14. We were playing baseball in the backyard, just the cousins and a few neighbors. I wasn't athletic, never had been. But I tried. Marlo had swung too wide and hit me in the ribs. I crumpled, gasping for air, tears already springing to my eyes. He'd looked down at me and said, "Don't ruin the fun again." Later, Velda told me I was too dramatic, too sensitive. "You're fine," she said. "You always make things bigger than they are." They never had to lie. They just made sure the version of me they told the world was easier to dismiss. I stared at Marlo's message again, fingers hovering over the reply button. I typed something, then deleted it. Then started again. But I didn't send it. Instead, I opened the email Clarissa's contact at the legal clinic had provided and drafted a note. Subject: Ongoing intimidation from relatives involved in neglect case. Body: Attached is a message sent by a family member involved in the incident currently under review. I am documenting this for the record, as it aligns with a long-standing pattern of emotional control and verbal dismissal following acts of neglect. Please advise if this should be submitted to CPS or your office directly. I hit send without rereading it. Later that night, I opened a blank document on my laptop and began outlining everything in formal detail. The tour itinerary, the fall, the 3-hour walk, the way no one checked on me, the messages I'd sent that went unanswered, the fact that I'd been left alone in another state with a visible injury. I wrote for over an hour. No breaks, just truth. I ended the statement with one line. I no longer believe my family has my best interest at heart. Typing that didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like finally pulling off the mask I'd been forced to wear since I was old enough to understand that being loved and being tolerated weren't the same thing. Around 10, Haley texted, "Mom says you're going to get Uncle Marlo fired." That was all. No, "How are you?" No, "What happened?" Just a warning, like I was causing damage, and she was the messenger. I didn't respond. Instead, I copied the message, pasted it into a new section of my file, and titled it Collateral Responses. They thought I was burning down the house out of spite, but what they didn't see was that I'd already been standing in the ashes. All I did was point to the smoke. I opened the shared folder I'd created earlier and uploaded the full case file, labeled, dated, and backed up. Then, I attached it to an email addressed to the school district's HR director. Subject: Professional Conduct. Urgent, no body text. Just the file. I watched the green progress bar crawl across the screen. Upload complete. Sent to school district HR mailbox. No drama, no confession, no crying. Just a quiet, final click. Because if they wanted quiet, they should have listened when I whispered. Morning came quiet. Not peaceful, just quiet. The kind of quiet that follows after something loud has shifted in the room, even if no one was there to hear it. I brewed coffee in the hotel room, mostly for the smell. My stomach didn't want anything, but the smell made things feel normal, adult, functional. Then my inbox pinged. Subject line, RE, Professional Conduct, Urgent. I clicked before I could overthink. The reply was brief. We've received your file. A review has begun. The attached footage is under formal review and has been logged with District Council. That was it. I opened the video one last time. Not because I needed to, but because I wanted to watch it without flinching. Marlo's hand pushed my shoulder, my body pitched forward, and I slipped out of frame. No edits, no commentary, just truth in motion. It didn't need a caption. It didn't need an explanation. It didn't even need my name on it. It only needed daylight. I closed the file. Then the voicemail icon blinked. Velda. I put in my earbuds and hit play. Her voice was clipped, professional, like she was practicing damage control. I hope you're happy, she began. You've embarrassed us all. Marlo could lose his job over this nonsense. You've made a private family matter into a public circus. I paused it right there. That was all I needed. I saved the audio, labeled it, Discredit Us, Protect. In my digital notes, I wrote a new line. No concern about the injury, only the exposure. My phone buzzed again. This time, a message from Haley. No greeting, just 4 screenshots. A forwarded thread from the family group chat, the one I hadn't been invited to. She's always been unhinged. We should have left her out completely. She'll crawl back eventually. Let her enjoy her little rebellion. I didn't cry. I didn't delete. I didn't argue. I forwarded the screenshots to the legal rep handling my case with the school district. No extra message, just data. Then I opened the anonymous reporting portal for the school and started typing. This isn't revenge, I wrote. This is accountability. One should never come at the cost of silence. I attached the footage, the voicemail, the screenshots. I included date stamps, names, locations, every detail, neatly organized, labeled, cross-referenced. I'd learned that truth doesn't need to raise its voice to be heard. It just needs to be filed where the right eyes will read it. Once I submitted, I leaned back in the desk chair and stared at the wall. My foot throbbed. The pressure cuff around my ankle pulsed in sync with my heartbeat. I thought of all the ways I'd tried to tell the truth before. Softly, carefully, with disclaimers. I used words like, I could be wrong, or I might be overreacting. And each time, They nodded and dismissed it, like patting a dog on the head for barking at the wrong mailman. But this time, I hadn't asked for permission, and that was the difference. Later, I updated my private log. I kept it like a case file now, one I would have drafted for a client back when I still believed in building things by the book. I logged 6:42 a.m. Email confirmation of receipt from HR, 6:58 a.m. Voicemail from Velda, archived, 7:11 a.m. Haley's screenshots, submitted, 7:26 a.m. Formal submission to reporting portal by 8:15 a.m. My inbox pinged again. Subject: Administrative leave notification, Marlo Vex. The email was short and surgical. Mr. Vex has been placed on immediate administrative leave pending internal review. He has been notified not to return to campus or communicate with students or staff until further notice. I sat there for another minute, just staring at the screen. Not in shock, not with glee, with confirmation. Not once, through all of it, had anyone asked if I was okay. By early afternoon, the hallway outside my room buzzed with the sound of vacuums and doors clicking shut. I'd just closed my laptop when the hotel phone rang. I let it go. 2 minutes later, my cell buzzed with a call from the front desk. A soft voice said, "There's a call for you here, ma'am. From someone named Henny?" I already knew. I thanked her, slipped on my brace, and walked slowly down to the lobby. The phone at the counter was warm when I picked it up. Aunt Henny's voice came through the line with forced sweetness, like maple syrup poured over cold toast. "Sweetheart," she said, "I just heard from your mom. She's very upset." I didn't answer. "You've created quite a storm," she continued. "I told her I'd call. It's not too late to fix this." My grip on the receiver didn't tighten, but the silence on my end was enough. She shifted her tone, just slightly. "Your uncle has a family to support. Do you really want to go that far? This can still stay within the family. We don't have to drag it into courtrooms or, God forbid, social media." There it was. The warning, wrapped in concern. The performance of peacekeeping. "You shouldn't have sent that file, Lark. You'll regret it when things spiral. People forget. Files don't." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't lean in. "That's the point." She tried to soften again. "You know your mother. She doesn't always say the right thing, but her heart's in the right place." That was the kind of lie families told themselves when they couldn't explain away the harm, so they repackaged it as love. "They're not asking me to forgive," I said, mostly to myself. "They're asking me not to remember in public." Henny didn't reply. I hung up the phone, nodded to the front desk, and walked back upstairs. Each step up the carpeted stairwell felt heavier than the last, but not because of the brace. It was the weight of history, of stories rewritten by the people who got to tell them first. Inside my room, I opened the laptop again and logged the call. Title: Family using intermediaries to apply pressure. Entry: Call received via front desk, approx. 12:45 p.m. Henny Lang. Language included emotional redirection, implication of financial consequence to Marlo, and statements discouraging public reporting. Tone: conciliatory masking coercion. A few minutes later, another voicemail came in. Velda. This time, her voice was almost calm, so much worse than angry. "You should have kept this between us. Now I don't know how to protect you." I didn't archive that one. I didn't even finish it. I deleted it without saving. She never tried to protect me. Only the version of me she told people about. The one who gets emotional under pressure. The one who likes attention. The one who, somehow, always misremembers. Later that evening, I was eating from a paper container of soup when a new email arrived from the school's legal department. The subject line read, "Statement requested." I clicked it open, hands steady. The message was brief. "We are beginning the formal review process. Please confirm your willingness to appear in a hearing and provide your verbal statement. Your presence will help clarify events from your first-hand perspective. You are not required to attend, but your involvement is encouraged. Final date and time to be confirmed. I read the last line again. Please confirm your willingness to appear in a formal review hearing. My thumb hovered over the reply button. I didn't need to think about it. It wasn't about what they'd done anymore. It was about what I was willing to stand for. After replying to the legal department, I closed my laptop and pushed it away like it might bite. There was nothing else to send, no more edits to make. I had done my part, and now the waiting began. Outside the window, the sky had shifted to that slow, golden hour before sunset, when everything looks softer, even what isn't. I leaned back into the chair and told myself to breathe. Just once, just deep enough to feel it. Then my inbox pinged again. Subject: Saw your story. I think this is yours. I almost skipped it, assuming it was spam, but the sender's name stopped me. Emery Glass. Not a name I knew, but the message was short. I was at the Palace site that day. I saw what happened. I had my phone out filming the architecture, and I caught something. I think it's you. I hope it helps. There was a video file attached. I clicked it. The clip was maybe 10 seconds long, but it did more in 10 seconds than all my words had managed in 10 years. It showed me, standing near the steps, adjusting my camera, smiling the way you smile when someone asks you to pose, and you don't want to seem difficult. Marlowe appeared from behind, grinning like a boy about to pull a prank. He shoved me, not hard, not violent, but enough. I stumbled forward, my arms flailed, and I disappeared from frame. No one ran to help, no one screamed. In the background, Velda turned her head away. Haley laughed. They didn't think it was serious. They didn't even think it mattered. But someone else had seen it. Someone else had recorded it. And now it was real. I stared at the screen until the video looped. Then I played it again. And again. It didn't make me feel vindicated. It made me feel hollow, like I'd been given a picture of my own bones, clear and undeniable, but deeply unsettling. It's a weird kind of grief, I whispered, watching someone else prove your pain. I didn't send an email reply. I just forwarded the clip straight to the school district, attached it to my ongoing report folder. No commentary, no explanation. The video spoke louder than I ever could. Then I turned off my phone. Not out of exhaustion, but intention. At the hotel desk, I opened my notebook and wrote a single line. This clip came from a stranger. Because strangers see what family refuses to acknowledge. I drew 2 columns on the page. At the top of one I wrote, saw it and denied it. At the top of the other, didn't see it but believed me anyway. Under the first, I listed names. Velda, Marlowe, Haley, Aunt Henny. Under the second, only one name stood, Clarissa. The next morning, I reopened my inbox. A new message from the legal team. We've reviewed the new footage. Mr. Vex's conduct appears to meet criteria for student endangerment. Legal review underway. Confirmation of your in-person statement is still requested. I didn't hesitate. I typed back, yes, I'll speak. Then I opened the video one last time, not for evidence, for closure. I watched myself fall again. Then I whispered, you caught me, Emery, when they wouldn't. It wasn't justice yet, but it was a beginning. The ride to the hospital was short. I'd arranged it myself, a quiet service car with a driver who didn't talk unless I did. I liked that. No forced small talk, no awkward glances at my wrapped ankle, just silence that respected my space. When I checked in at the front desk, the clerk smiled, asked if I had an appointment. I gave her my name. Before I could finish spelling it, she interrupted politely. Your mother is already here, asking for a status update. Would you like us to keep her updated or? I didn't need time to answer. You can tell her I'm capable of speaking for myself. The woman nodded, typed something into her screen, and didn't ask again. 10 minutes later, Velda walked in like she had the right to be there. Like none of the things I'd documented, recorded, or endured had changed a thing. Her posture said authority. Her face said damage control. She didn't ask about my leg. She didn't glance at the boot or the crutches leaning against the chair beside me. Instead, she sat down across from me and opened with, "I just came to ask one thing. Who else knows?" Not how I was. Not if I needed anything. Just, who else knows? I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The pause alone did most of the talking. "You've made us look like monsters," she continued. "And now the school district is involved." Her voice was calm but clipped, like a teacher scolding a student in front of a class, like she was hoping if she stayed even enough, she could control the story. I tilted my head slightly, studying her. The woman who once told me to toughen up when I got hives at summer camp. Who said real pain doesn't announce itself after my first panic attack at 13. And now, here she was, more concerned with the fallout than the fracture. "You're not monsters," I said, my voice steady. "Monsters usually believe what they're doing is wrong. You just believe it never happened." She blinked. "Once." Sharp. "I never said you weren't hurt." "You never said I was either." She opened her mouth again, but I beat her to it. I pulled out my phone, scrolled to the official case number assigned by the school district, and showed her the screen. "This is real now, not just family drama, not just a misunderstanding." She stared at the screen like it betrayed her, like it was a living thing, baring its teeth. "You asked the wrong question," I said. "You should have asked if I'm okay." The tension in the room was thick. Her fingers twisted the strap of her purse like it was the only thing anchoring her to the floor. Before she could answer, a hospital administrator entered the waiting room. "Ms. DeVoe, we're ready for your intake. Would you like privacy?" I stood, slow but firm. Yes, I would. Velda rose as well, clearly trying to regain composure. "We can talk about this later," she said. I didn't even look at her. "No, we won't." She didn't push back. She didn't argue. She just followed me with her eyes as I turned and followed the staff member down the hall. For years, I'd wanted a moment like this to feel like a victory. But it didn't. It just felt final, like a page turning itself. I didn't hate her. I didn't want revenge. I just didn't want to be rewritten anymore. Back in the consultation room, the nurse checked my vitals while someone typed quietly at a nearby desk. A social worker hovered near the door, clipboard in hand. Then the attending came in and said gently, "You're welcome to speak on record today. Just let us know when you're ready." I nodded, looked them all in the eye, and said, "I'm ready for my official statement. I want everything documented." The room where they brought me for the official intake looked more like a neutral conference space than a medical office. The walls were beige. There was a clock that ticked too loudly, and a stack of clipboards that hadn't been touched in hours. I sat at one end of the rectangular table. Across from me were two administrators, one from the hospital, one from youth services, and a third woman with a laptop open in front of her, ready to transcribe every word I said. No one asked how I was feeling. They didn't coddle. They didn't perform empathy. And strangely, I preferred it that way. What I needed now wasn't sympathy. It was a place to speak where no one was preparing a rebuttal before I finished a sentence. They asked for a timeline, so I gave them one. Starting with the moment we arrived in Utah, I walked them through each beat. The fall, the pain, the refusal to be believed, the walking tour, the hotel, the silence, the text, the Uber, the X-ray. It felt clinical, but not cold. Factual, just facts. No bending for their comfort. No softening edges that had already drawn blood. When I finished, they didn't look shocked. They just nodded, took a few notes, and typed. One of the staff members, the one with glasses and an ID badge that read Case Liaison, cleared her throat. "Thank you. Based on your statement and the documents submitted previously, this qualifies for mandatory reporting. A cross-agency inquiry will begin today. CPS will be notified due to the timeline of events and your dependency status during travel." I nodded. No surprise, no panic. They slid a form across the table. "Just your signature to confirm the statement and your understanding of the process." I signed, with both hands steady. This was the first time in my life my voice wasn't being weighed, doubted, or diluted. It was being filed. After the interview, I was led to a smaller consultation room. A legal advocate from the Youth Services Division met me there. She was kind, efficient, and didn't ask for my life story. She simply said, "Your report has already been escalated. You'll likely be contacted by the school district's hearing board, possibly CPS. In some cases, law enforcement may request clarification." She handed me a printout of the materials already shared: file numbers, timestamps, summaries. "This is your record, a courtesy copy for you." I stared at the folder in my lap. It felt like a small shield, one made of paperwork and signatures instead of metal. It wasn't a promise of safety, but it was a form of proof. Sometimes safety doesn't come from protection. Sometimes it comes from receipts. The moment I stepped out of the consultation room, my phone buzzed again. I had returned to the waiting room, limping only slightly now that the swelling had begun to fade under treatment. Subject: Marlo Vex, suspension notice finalized. The email was short and surgical. The school district had completed its internal review and determined that Mr. Vex's behavior was inconsistent with its standards for educator conduct. He had been placed on administrative leave and notified not to return to campus pending the outcome of the disciplinary hearing. I read the message twice. Then I deleted it. Not because it didn't matter, but because it already had. I didn't send it to Velda, or Haley, or anyone. No updates, no screenshots, no breadcrumbs. The silence this time belonged to me. Later that night, I returned to the hotel room to pack. It took less than 10 minutes. Most of my clothes were untouched, my toiletries half used. I moved slowly, not out of sadness, but intention. There wasn't anything left to say. Not to them. I left a single sticky note on the nightstand. Not a threat, not a jab, just truth. I didn't set the fire. I just refused to stay inside the house while it burned. My ride to the airport came 20 minutes early. The lobby was quiet. I didn't look around for anyone on my way out. I climbed into the car, pulled the door shut behind me, and said nothing as we pulled away. But as the hotel disappeared from view, I whispered to myself, "Now I know! Being right isn't the same as being safe, but it's a damn good start." The airport gate was quiet, except for the low shuffle of feet and the occasional crinkle of snack wrappers. I found a seat against the far wall, away from the chargers and the crowd. I wasn't tired, but my body felt like it had been holding its breath for days. I didn't text anyone. Not Haley, not Marlo, not Velda. Instead, I opened my inbox one more time, not to check for messages, but to finish something I'd been drafting for days in my head. The message that would end this story, not with revenge, but with release. I started with the subject line: "This is the last time you'll hear from me." No dramatics, no punctuation for effect, just the finality of it. Then I began to type. "You left me, on the sidewalk, in pain. You watched it happen and told me to keep walking. You called me dramatic. Then you called me dangerous when I documented it. I'm not going to make peace with that. I don't need your version of love. This is the last message I will ever send. Don't reply." That last line, I stared at it for a long time. It wasn't meant to be cold. It was meant to be clear. I signed it with my full name. Not Lark, not sweetheart, not the girl who used to send handmade birthday cards even when hers was forgotten. Just Lark DeVoe. I reread it twice, then hovered my finger over the send button. Then I pressed it. There wasn't a sound when it sent, just the soft ping of the system accepting it, as if something had been lifted off the servers and off my spine all at once. There was no applause, no weightless catharsis, but there was peace. I leaned back in the airport chair, letting the ambient noise blur around me. My foot still ached beneath the brace. My ribs twinged from the flight booking line earlier, but the pain had changed. It had definition now, like something I could work around instead of drown in. Pain doesn't vanish, I thought, but when it has a name, when it's been witnessed, it becomes something else. Something I can manage. Boarding was called a few minutes later. I gathered my things without checking my phone. I didn't need a response. I already had the only one that mattered. Silence. The kind I chose. The line moved slow. I kept to myself. When I reached my row, I tucked into the window seat, pulled my bag under the chair, and leaned into the cool plastic wall. The woman beside me smiled as she sat down, probably in her late 60s. Red scarf, sturdy hands, a voice that carried kindness. "Traveling alone?" she asked casually. I gave a small smile back. "Not exactly," I said. "I brought all my evidence with me." She laughed, not understanding, but she didn't press, and I appreciated that. As the plane taxied toward the runway, I closed my eyes. Behind them, faces flickered. Clarissa, the nurse who saw the swelling before I spoke a word, the legal advocate who didn't flinch when I said family neglect, Emery Glass, who didn't know me at all and yet handed me the truth without strings. They didn't owe me anything, and they still gave me everything. Sometimes it doesn't take a hero to save you. Sometimes it just takes 3 strangers to remind you that you're worth being seen. I felt the plane lift off, and with it, a kind of weight peeled away. Mid-flight, my phone buzzed once. No name, just a preview. "You'll regret cutting your family out. Velda." I didn't even open it. I slid the message to the left and hit delete. Then, I whispered, just to myself, so soft the engine swallowed it whole. "No. You'll regret not being worth keeping." It had been a month, 32 days to be exact. I woke up in my own bed, in my own apartment, without a knock at the door or a voicemail blinking red. No suitcase on the floor, no hotel shampoo bottles lined up like trophies of endurance. Just morning light slanting in through the blinds, and a quiet hum from the fridge in the kitchen. My ankle still ached in the mornings, the kind of pain that reminds you you're still healing but not broken. I walked slowly to the kitchen. No crutches now, no brace. Just the soft echo of my own steps. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking over my shoulder to explain why I moved the way I did. I poured myself a cup of coffee and opened my laptop. The inbox was empty. For once, that felt like a blessing. It turns out, peace doesn't announce itself. It doesn't text or knock or show up with flowers. It just starts arriving when you stop making space for people who never deserve to stay. Later that day, I opened Instagram out of habit. I hadn't posted anything since the trip. I wasn't avoiding it. I just had nothing to prove anymore. But what I saw made me pause. Velda had posted a photo. The whole family at a brunch table, dressed in pastels, smiling too hard. Marlo was there, arm around Haley, Aunt Henny. Even Ben, who never used to smile with teeth, beamed like he had something to sell. Caption: "Rebuilding stronger. Family is everything." No tag, no mention, no trace of me. A mutual friend had commented, "Looks like the whole crew's back together." Velda replied with a heart emoji. And I closed the app. No screenshot, no message, no reaction. I opened my documents instead. The old folder titled Case Legal. I hovered over it for a second, then renamed it Kept. Because that's what it had become. Not just a record of what happened, but of what I refused to let be erased. That afternoon, I walked 2 blocks to the bookstore cafe around the corner from my apartment. I hadn't done that in weeks. The sun hit my shoulder blades like a nudge from someone saying, "Keep going." I ordered an iced tea, sat by the window, and bought a new journal from the rack up front. One with a navy blue cover and thick, unlined pages. When I opened it, I didn't hesitate. On the first page, I wrote, "I used to explain everything. Now I name it once and let it go." A girl in her 20s sat down at the next table, typing on her laptop. She looked over and asked, "Are you a writer?" I smiled. "Not officially, but I file things that matter." She laughed. "That's probably more honest than most writers I know." We talked for a bit. Nothing deep, just books, coffee, the way strangers sometimes do when they have no reason to pretend. That night, I stood in front of the mirror in my bathroom, toothbrush in hand. My reflection stared back with the same eyes, but a different weight. Not lighter, just mine. The scar was still there above my ankle, faint now, but visible. And I didn't look away. I still limp. I just don't explain it anymore. I still hurt. But now it's mine. Not something they get to rename or reduce. There were no voicemails, no apologies, no invitations to reconcile. And if they came, I wasn't sure I'd want them. Because some endings come without applause. Just peace. And a woman walking out of the frame. Not because she fell, but because she finally chose where to go.